Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's school committee meeting. Mr. Provo, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have a consent agenda, the minutes from March 20th, 2018, and oath to bills and payroll.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Couple more ayes, please.
Aye.
Okay, good, thank you. Opposed? None. We have two sections in the meeting for input from interested citizens. We are going to do a presentation on social and emotional learning and school safety. If you have comments for that, please save them, and we'll do a special public input session after the principals have made their presentations. But if there's anyone else who has business before the school committee that they would like to have public input for, please come up to the podium. None. All right, recognition. Let's go right to the indoor track team. We'll come back to you, Provo, in a minute, okay? Coach Lynn?
Thank you. You ever have that feeling like you've been here before? I think it was probably exactly a year ago we did this, so it's a pleasure to be back here. Very exciting times, obviously, for track and field in Littleton. Just as an aside to what we're doing tonight, we have 119 kids in our outdoor track program. So if we flash back to the years ago when we went through the process of building a track, I think it was well worth it. In addition, last year we started a unified track program, and that has another 13 kids in it. So altogether, there's 132 spring outdoor track student athletes competing and preparing right now. The girls' track team went to the Reggie Lewis Center again back in February at that point, Mark? Early February? Yeah. Right, February at that point. Still February, and went down there again and won another state championship. So they now hold the record for state championships at Littleton High School, too. And we have a couple things left to do for them tonight, obviously, and then the street signs did just come in, and I'll get those over to DPW, and I'm sure they'll put them up on the 4 points for enter town. So without further ado, we're going to present our coaches and state championship student athletes with their commemorative plaques. I think we'll start with two of our coaches aren't able to be here. Amanda Wright has taken on a new position. She's down in New York City now at a new university, so she's not able to be here. And Holly Ouellette is not here. But Heather Rhodes, assistant coach, throws coach is here. And our head girls indoor track, outdoor track, and boys and girls cross country coach, Mark Saucier, is also here. Now for student athletes. In alphabetical order, Joe Feltus. Yeah, we're going to do that afterwards. Yep. Grace Formicella. Tiana French. Haley Freund. Did you tripped last year coming up here, right?
But no big deal, no one will remember that.
Good job. Abigail Hartzell. We have two sets of twins on this team, which is Meet Emma Hartzell. Catherine Houston. Hannah Jane. Callie Morvay. Casey Ricard. Next set of twins. Caitlin Rothman. Sarah Rothman. And Camille Sawazik. And as we did last year, we'd like to present Dr. Clenchey with his plaque as well. And I think we brought everybody, Dr. Clenchey, we brought everybody up there and we did a picture. And
Yes, let's do
get
that.
social media and all that, so we can do that. I think you brought them up there, it's up to you guys.
Okay, this is gonna be like a. Okay. Sorry. Let's open it up. This is gonna be. This is all gonna fit. This one has to school. Somebody, Grace, also keep them over here. You get to be next to me. Do you have a track?
I'll stand for this one. Make sure you got your plaque right side up.
Look here, Heather. Here you go. 1, 2, 3.
There's so many cameras. Where to look?
There's a coach.
Yeah.
And thank you for allowing us to be part of the agenda. Athletics in Littleton are really thriving right now. We always start participation. And this spring season, I already mentioned track, but we have 312 student athletes in the spring right now. We had over 800 student athletes fall, winter, and spring this year. So things are good, and appreciate you allowing us to be a part of it tonight.
Thank you. So I'd just like to say that on behalf of the school committee, we appreciate Coach Lynn keeping us focused on what he thinks is important and the number of kids that participate, and it is important, but winning a state champion is pretty cool too. At the end of the day, if you can pull something like that off, it's pretty great, so congratulations.
Congratulations.
All right, thank you. You guys don't have to stay. How fast can you get out? All right, Mr. Provo, can we have a student representative report, please?
Absolutely. All right, so starting with Shaker Lane, Principal Kane would like to say thank you to Girl Scout Troop number 66292, members Katie Kulchuk, Maeve Tooley, Kaylee Hannon, and Olivia Olson for their partnership in revitalizing the second grade garden with teacher Miss McGrath. The girls hosted a bake sale during last week's conference evening and raised $200 to put toward their improvement efforts. The Russell Street School is having their basket raffle and ice cream social tonight from 6 to 8. And at the middle school, the students led their parent-teacher conferences and are finishing up English Language Arts MCAS in the next week. And finally, the reason why Olivia couldn't make it tonight is because of the high school's production of Hello Dolly, which will be premiering this Friday at 7:30, Saturday at 7:30, and Sunday at 4.
Thank you. All right, so we have a couple of short presentations, and then we'll jump into the larger one. So we're going to start with the middle school 6th grade Kennedy Lake field trip. There's one previous school committee member called it the Kenobi Lake field trip.
Where are you looking?
Hi, so I'm Diane Chicana,
And I'm Lily Alden.
and we're here seeking approval for the annual 6th grade Canopy Lake field trip, our team building, at the end of the year.
We used our enterprise and people money from our fall project to offset the cost for all the kids, so it's a more affordable way to celebrate at the end of the year.
Okay. This is an out-of-state trip, so it does require school committee approval.
I'll make a motion to approve the 6th grade trip to Canopy Lake Park on, you don't have a specific date in June?
June 19th.
On 19 June.
Second.
Motion made second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, so there was you guys are fine. An email that came through, the boys lacrosse team went to do a scrimmage that was supposed to be in Massachusetts, ended up in New Hampshire. And there was a question about, out-of-state field trip, blah, blah, blah. I'd like us to think about revisiting that policy so that we're in New England. Out-of-state is like 10 minutes in some directions. And maybe we should think about a, mileage type of thing instead of just being out-of-state, and whether it's overnight, those kinds of things. And maybe we can not bother other people to have to come to these meetings for something that we know we're gonna do. Just something to look at.
I agree with that. I think it'd be smart to delegate some parameters to the
Certainly
administration.
craft something else.
Yeah, doesn't have to be any time in there, if you, in a hurry, but, sure. All right, let's move the agenda. We're gonna go with the Alumni Field Littleton Youth Baseball Storage Shed request.
So I'm Tommy Prue, 66 Spectre Pond Road. I'm the director of softball for Littleton Youth Baseball Softball. Didn't know we were going to be up so soon, so our
Oh.
president actually is.
Oh, do you wanna wait? I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
Okay. All right.
So with it's fine. So with the addition of the new jet field on the alumni complex, we Littleton Youth Baseball Softball would like to have a storage shed nearby the field for all of youth softball, including the middle school and varsity and JV teams. Littleton Youth Baseball Softball is willing to pay for it. All of the parameters are up here. The storage needs various pieces of equipment. Primarily, the big one would be the pitching machine that could be used by any of the teams. We have electrical at the fields, so let's make use of it. Normal stuff, bags of lime, lining machine, quick dry agent, rakes, drags, pitching screen, even a water hose. There's water there, so I don't know if you've ever been at the old jet field or any other fields for that matter. Midsummer gets very dry, dusty. You like to hose it down before the game. So now that there's water there, let's store some equipment for that to be able to make use of it. Other various items for game day stuff, so game balls, team equipment bags, kind of all of that. So the shed itself, we worked with Steve Mark to find out exactly what the alumni maintenance shed, how it was purchased and who built it and everything. We want to match the look of it, everything. So it was purchased from Eastern Shed. we contacted them. This is roughly what we want the shed to look like. There is no side door and window. It'll just be the 5-foot scroll-up garage door style on the left.
How about the flower box?
Yeah, if you want it, we'll put it, but everything's the same. The pitch of the roof, the height of the walls. The only thing that's different is the footprint. We're only looking for an 8x12 or 8x10. We prefer the 8x12 just because the incremental cost of doing that kind of gains more space in there. We did want to go to a 10-foot. It's just wider, and then it would take up more space, and it'll have the same color shingles, everything to match. And there's just some specs on kind of this thing. And the location, kind of hard to see on here, but yep, there's a little yellow box. So it's basically up against the fence on the inside, on the asphalt behind home plate. It's the double lines are the 10 or the 12-foot lengths, and that's sort of the location we think it best would be put in because it's close enough to the entrances to the field to get the pitching machine or the line making machine and everything out there. So we're amenable to sliding it up or down wherever the best place is. Ideally, it would be nice to put it up against the fencing around where the grills are. Unfortunately, there's an electrical box in the asphalt that prevents that, so we slid it farther to the right is where we're looking. So, the Littleton Youth Baseball Softball is willing to pay for the shed. It's roughly around $3,500, give or take, depending on the size. We've enlisted the Sturts Brothers, Start to Finish Construction and Littleton Earthworks to do the in-kind donation of actually putting in a pad if we indeed need to put in a cement pad. The cement pad itself will be an additional $1,000 of material. Plus, it's also, because everything's already built, I'm assuming we cannot drive a cement mixer down the center entrance down to it, so they'd have to take wheelbarrows and shovel the cement in. Contractors I've been talking to keep questioning, why do we have to put a cement pad in? We're not storing any vehicles in it. The asphalt should be thick enough to handle 1-inch concrete blocks that are normally underneath the shed. It's $80 for a wood floor. That's the only rebate we got. We were able to get on it. We're not doing the floor, so $80 versus $1,000. Just that's about all. Any questions?
Steve, you've been consulting with these guys on this?
Yeah, we have. We met over there. Mike Lynn was there as well, and we kind of reviewed the location and kind of determined that was within the fence. That was the most ideal location. It's out of the way. It's not really used that much. Mike Lynn's here for comments as well and questions.
Oh, is he still here? Oh, sorry. Thank you.
So the question of the concrete pad, we'd have to talk to maybe the building department and the building inspector and some contractors, and also our project manager, Kevin Heffernan, and get his opinion on the concrete pad or non-concrete pad. But for right now, we think it's the right way to go, but that's, up to the experts, I guess. So.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Can you go back to the placement there? I can't tell from the picture here, and I didn't get a chance to drive over. How's that in relation to, I can't tell, is that a shadow line or is there the backstop fence there in terms of how it's placed?
Yeah, the backstop fence is up along here. Here's the angle of the backstop fence.
So is that the shadow?
Yeah,
this is okay, I couldn't tell if that was the uprights of the fence or the shadow.
No, this is just, the lines here are just the shadows from the fence that's along this concrete perimeter of the field.
Oh, that makes it a lot better.
So it's behind the backstop,
It's behind the
outside
backstop, up
of the
against
actual
the
playing
fence.
surface?
That's what I thought it was within.
Okay.
Right, and here, if you can see the cursor moving, this is the edge of the fence of the grill area, is right here, so there's a little bit of area here, and this is an electrical box here that we can't cover.
And then what side is the door going to be on?
That's, yeah.
This end here.
Yeah.
And there's no other purpose that we intend that space was left vacant for, right?
No, as far as I know, no, but.
Okay, and it doesn't, again, because I couldn't see the shadow lines there, it doesn't encroach on, you know, as you zoom it out, the walkway necessary to get around to the restrooms.
No, there's still plenty of space here to get to the restrooms. Again, this is the edge of the corner of the fence here, right where the cursor is where the grill fence is. So it's not actually extending out beyond even what that grill area, fenced-in area is. And there's still plenty of room to get through to the restrooms.
Yep. And then relative to the pad, I mean, unless there's a code requirement.
That would be, I was gonna say the same thing. I mean, if it's a code requirement, then we're gonna do it. If it's I think I'm smarter than you and you should put a concrete pad down, that's not the right determination. You know?
Right,
It's their shed, you know.
Right, we just want to make sure we're doing it
No.
You know, I agree.
that doesn't impede their hot top and.
I have brothers-in-law who are carpenters, and they argue all the time, and it's really an argument of, I think my opinion's more valid than your opinion.
So,
I just don't want us to get into that kind of situation. I just want it to be right there. I think Darryl said it right.
Right, if there's a code requirement or that there's a technical reason why it cannot be placed
Right.
there. I don't view that we have a requirement that it be on a concrete pad.
And then in terms of the 10 by 12 and everything else, I think you guys can work that out with Steve and Mike. If everybody's good and the bigger one fits, and you guys think you want the bigger one, then I don't think we're not really that.
No, only 8 by 12.
Yeah, 8 by 12.
Yep.
I don't think we need to worry about that too much. All right, any other questions? All right, we should vote on this, right?
Yep. Make a motion to approve the 8 by 12 shed for Littleton softball or Littleton baseball?
Littleton Youth Baseball and
It's
Softball.
Littleton Youth Baseball, softball.
Baseball, softball.
Technically, it's a softball shed, not a baseball shed.
That's all right.
Motion made and second. Any other further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you guys. Appreciate you guys, you know, obviously it's gonna benefit youth, but yeah, I appreciate that the middle school team's gonna be able to take advantage of that, and if the varsity's down there too, so thank you. All right, now we're going to go into the anti-bullying, social and emotional learning presentations from our principals and police chief.
The clicker's on the podium. You guys want?
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to present on behalf of Shaker Lane in regards to our social emotional learning and programmatic resources. You'll see the first thing that is truly the heart of Shaker Lane is our HEART program, which has been at Shaker Lane for a number of years prior to Mr. Faraday and the person before. And that really focuses on our core values: honesty, effort, acceptance, respect, and taking responsibility. Those core values are embedded throughout the day in our school. There isn't a day that goes by that we don't hear the students say, "Are you using HEART? You know, way to be honest, good job showing effort." Throughout the day, you'll see underneath the acronym is our heart jars and rewards. In each of our classrooms, the students have the opportunity to show heart, to show their best efforts, their acceptance, their ability to take responsibility when something goes wrong, because it's a learning opportunity for them. And they earn a heart. And once they fill their heart jar, they get a reward, and the class reward is something that they do in the classroom. Movies, pajama day, crazy hat day. And it's a real positive way for kids to show that social emotional piece at such a young age. We instituted this year positive office notes, and those come out randomly for children who show heart, who are being kind, caring, or displaying any of the acronyms related to heart. It's the opportunity to let students know that they feel empowered and they're making a difference, not just in their classroom, but across the whole school setting. The second piece of programmatic resources is our second step curriculum. And that curriculum, you know, when I started to delve into how long it's been in place at Shaker Lane, it's actually been in place since about 1999. And over the years, the past 3 years, they've adopted a newer form of the program. So it's evolved over the years with the needs of the students. And the program right now is really focused on the skills and social and academic success. And you'll see the 4 areas that each grade level, pre-K to 2, so we do teach this in our preschool program, are skills for learning, empathy, emotional management, and problem solving. And starting with our little guys in pre-K, there's also an additional component, which is the transition to kindergarten, which can be very emotional for kids, for parents. So we provide these supports for them. Each of those areas has lessons, anywhere from 25 to 30 lessons in each of them, and they're visual based because our kids at very young ages, from 3 to 8, are visually based. So they need to see what it looks like to look at a card with a child who has an angry face to understand empathy and emotional understanding of another student. It also teaches them problem solving skills. They are very egocentric at our age, which is developmentally appropriate. So getting along one-on-one with someone or thinking about themselves is great, but once you put a third person in there, it's very hard for them to manage that relationship. And how do I get along because I don't have that child's full attention? So that's a huge piece about problem solving. The third piece that we have up there is the social thinking curriculum we brought in this year. Both myself and our new school psychologist, Laura Braun, are very well versed in Michelle Garcia Winner's work, which is about the social development of kids taking abstract social language and putting it into a concrete way of learning for kids. So, for example, when you say to a 5 or 6-year-old, you need to listen, that is so abstract for what a 5-year-old is. They need to know, what does that mean? What does that look like? It means eyes watching, ears listening, body still, and then we go into pieces of the brain, the feet, the heart. This actually dovetails very well with our second step curriculum. A lot of the language is comparative, but it takes it to another level. In the social thinking curriculum, which was developed by Michelle Garcia Winner, who is a speech and language pathologist, she teaches through 5 storybooks, and those storybooks are thoughts and feelings. So what does it mean to have a thought and a feeling, and how do those feelings change? We teach kids that it's okay to have different feelings. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be mad. But we also give them the skills to deal with when you're frustrated, what should you do? Deep breathing, walk away, talk it out. So we talk about those pieces in the social thinking curriculum. The group plan, getting along with a group dynamics. We need to teach them to take turns listening, looking at each other. The other book is Thinking with Your Eyes. So, and this is when a child walks in the room, what is everybody doing right now? Do they have their snack out? Are they eating snack? Are they looking at the teacher? What are they focused on? So these books are meant to be read to the kids, but also a visual component as well. Body in the Group is a book that is about what does it look like to be in a group and to actually sit there and listen. So if they're wandering off to the side, we talk about being in the group and being together. And then whole body listening, which I just went over. We have started to implement the social thinking curriculum in small targeted groups this year. Some of it in the classroom, but we're going to take more of a proactive approach next year now that we're getting our feet wet with what the program looks like. Our school counselor, Justine Matherin, has done a wonderful job implementing this into some small groups that she works with. So we're looking next year to go into the classrooms and teach this along with Second Step. Another one that I didn't add up there was the Zones of Regulation. Again, another visual program that teaches children about being in the green zone, which is ready to learn, being in the yellow zone, they're upset. It puts that color with the feeling, and then we can talk about what are some ways we can get us back down to the green zone. The blue zone, which is a little bit like sad, unhappy, not feeling well, and then the red zone would be more of those behaviors that are challenging. And so we had a presentation in the fall during one of our building-based professional development programs where Laura Braun, our school psychologist, has provided some visuals, professional development for the staff, and then throughout the year has sporadically gone into classes. Again, looking at a more proactive approach next year. So our school-wide events, every month we have a community meeting. It always focuses on heart, so we bring it back to our social competency program. We read a book that's connected to some type of school project. So at the beginning of the year, we started off with Heart Prints by P.K. Hallinan. We read the book. We actually had one of our students read the book on Adobe Spark, presented it to the kids. And it's about leaving a heart print on someone else, how to make them feel good. And each child received a paper heart, and they could draw a picture, draw something kind, write something nice on how you can leave a heart print on someone. So a lot of the stuff that we do at Shaker Lane at the pre-K to 2 level is to build upon those social emotional skills so that when we hand them off to Russell Street, we're building a solid foundation. We connect these to service learning projects. This year we have done a food drive, a coat drive. We've also done reverse service learning projects where, as mentioned earlier this evening, we have the Girl Scout troop, 4 girls from Russell Street coming down and helping us with the garden. So reciprocating, not only taking in support from our community members, but also giving back to them. Our staff resources. This year, we have our guidance counselor. Brand new this year, full-time school psychologist has been a wonderful addition to our group. Miss Matherin, our guidance counselor, takes lunch groups. We also have not listed on there is our BCBA. She is .4. Rachel Cotter is a wonderful addition, not only for the children who require her support, but also a resource. And I like to think of myself as a resource to help the kids, to help the staff, to look at ways to improve on what we have in place. And school-wide meetings are our community meetings. And that's Shaker Lane.
Questions?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry to jump ahead, but, excuse me. So it strikes me at this age, with the really young ones, you probably have quite a range of, emotional development pieces there. Do you have particular strategies you work with the kids on recognizing that variety within their groups? It seems to be challenging, in terms of where they're at developmentally as they're interacting with their peers at that point.
So our universal approach would be the second step program. So that is taught as like a tier 1 to the entire group. If we find that a child is still not able to regulate their emotions, they're coming up upset, they're having a hard time separating from mom, we will put an additional layer, and that could be an incentive program. If they come into school 4 days out of the week, they get a special visit to the office. They have lunch with me. They have lunch with Miss Matherin. If there is lessons that need to be taught, Miss Matherin, our school counselor, has put some groups together and taught those additional levels. Again, I do think that should be part of, that we're planning on bringing that as part of the classroom tier 1 approach. But if those skills, if we see those skill deficits, we put a group together and we provide those supports.
So what about the inverse? It's the, right, so that's helping the child that may be off schedule a little bit, but the rest of the group understanding and dealing with that difference. There's like a diversity element of that.
Yep, and that is taught partially through our second step program of identifying what someone's upset, what can you do? What can you do in the classroom? Those can be lessons that the school counselor, the school psychologist have gone in and said, when someone's upset, what are some ways that you can do to help that person? You could offer some advice. You could offer to take a break with them. You could ask them if they need a break. You could walk away. So I hope that answers your question. Okay.
I just want to try to get a picture of how the group learns to deal with that different dynamic of each of the individuals.
And a huge piece of that, I do rely on Rachel, our BCBA, our behavior board certified behavior analyst, because she provides a lot of insight into talking to the groups of, what do behaviors looks like. And we do tell the kids, it's okay to be upset, but we have to manage those emotions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the Shaker Lane stuff?
Just one question, and I'm going to be asking this of everybody, so get ready. But a lot of parents have asked me how bullying is handled in each of the schools and, what steps are taken and all.
Yep. So if a parent, and I can speak to Shaker Lane. If a parent comes to me and says there's a bullying incident, it is something that I look into, and I ask, the target, the aggressor, and get the story, the information, how many incidents. It's information. We do have a bullying prevention program. The bullying protocols that we have to follow here at Littleton Public Schools. So we go through those protocols as needed. We determine whether or not it's a credible bullying event. I have not risen to the level at this point where there has been one to have to separate a student or put a safety plan specifically in place through the bullying protocols. But that's how I have dealt with it. Any follow-up questions to that? Can I just clarify one thing, Jen?
Yeah.
So a lot of times, that word can be used very strongly, and developmentally, we have to teach them that is it teasing, is it unkind behavior, and how can we shape that behavior? So there's a lot of instruction that goes around cases like that may not rise to the level of bullying, but it's happening and we're noticing a pattern, and how can we intervene? So that's another piece, just to answer that. It's about shaping the behavior and making sure it's not intentional bullying, but maybe some bad behavior, a behavior we need to shape.
I think that's a good point. I think bullying is a word that can have different repercussions, or different scope to different people. And a lot of the stuff you talked about in the HARP program, to me, it implies that what you're trying to stop is antisocial behaviors that some might call bullying, and some might call teasing, and some might call other things. So I think that on a daily basis, what I'm hearing is that that's going on a regular basis. And then specific to what the bullying protocol, what we talk about here in school committee, which is what was defined by the state several years ago, and that all the public school districts had to implement. You're talking about the bullying protocols, interventions, safety plans, which are specific to, and I would hope, and I think it bears out, as you said, with the particular population, I think we're going to hear a little bit more about that at different buildings where that might be more prevalent because of the population, So I think we'll hear that as we go through the presentations.
And Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's probably a similar answer to Daryl's question as well, right? Like a lot of the stuff about teaching other students how to deal with students who might not be, might have different behaviors is built into this HARP program. It's a pretty full circle program.
It is. So we've actually done some community meetings where we've seen presentations, or we've had, I know one time we had an author come in who talked about effort and how he wasn't treated well, but this is how he overcame it, and he pushed through and he persevered. So, we use those words: perseverance, integrity, grit, and, we use those language with our kids in a much smaller scale of word.
Thank you.
Other questions?
All right, nope.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, folks. I think as we look at Russell Street School, you'll see lots of similarities, K to 5. That's one of the things that we strive for academically, as well as social emotionally. I've been before you previously saying my personal belief is developing citizenship in our elementary students is at least as important, if not more important, than their academic achievement. I think creating, helping children become successful citizens in their community starts young, and there are lots of things that are different today than they were when I was a kid, and it's harder on kids today. And Dr. Harrington and I were talking about that. There's lots of pressures. We see technology pushing down even into the 5th grade and 4th grade, and there's lots of pressures. So this is a really important topic, and one that we take seriously at Russell Street. When I arrived 6 years ago in 2012, 2013, there was a big faculty push for a building-wide approach to social emotional learning and character development. At that time, they had evaluated some programs, and we decided to implement the responsive classroom approach school-wide at Russell Street. That was a very expensive training that the district invested in, and every single one of our classroom teachers spent a week in the summer being trained in the responsive classroom approach. It's basically a character education program. It's woven throughout the day. Some of the things you may have heard are things like morning meeting or closing meeting, but it goes throughout the day. There's teachable moments about, I was in a classroom, as an example, I was in a classroom last week where a student was moving out of town, and they were having a little party for that student. And because I came in, I was talking with the student, and he was really excited to tell me what was going on. And another student said, "Hey, I'm doing blah 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 blah." And the teacher said, "Hold on a second. Let's talk. Like, what are we doing right now? What the focus right now is on so and so who's moving." And I'm sure Mr. Pizzillo wants to hear that, but let's keep the focus here, and then we'll move it. So those teachable moments through responsive classroom, the language that we use, the empowering of students, helping them solve conflict in an appropriate fashion. Is really what responsive classroom is about. And so our new staff, when they're hired, commit to taking that program, not immediately, but making sure that we continue that at Russell Street. the faculty buy-in was huge for responsive classroom, and because of that, it's become a way of life, much like the HEART program. It's become a way of life at Russell Street. So one of the things that, as we talk about school-wide meeting and messages that I give at school-wide meeting, Michelle talked about some of the activities that they do. Almost every single school-wide meeting this year has started with me talking to students about who they did something kind for today and who did something kind for them. I sent a message to parents not long ago saying that's one of the things I asked my kids at dinner. Not how was school, but who did you make a difference for today? And did somebody make a difference for you? And how was that? Was it an academic difference? Was it a social difference? Did you drop your books and someone helped you pick them up? How did you go out of your way to make somebody feel good today? And this whole idea of spreading the good feeling, Michelle talked about putting a heart imprint on people. I think the more we can help kids understand, and as adults, the more we can go out of our way to make somebody feel good during the day in some way, shape, or form. That's how we change culture. That's how we change the way we handle conflict. As we move on, there was a question about bullying. We do formal bullying programs at Russell Street. They're 4 to 5 to 6 lessons per classroom. Our guidance counselor, Mrs. Layton, does them. She's been dabbling and trying to find the program that she likes best. This year she's using, in grade 3, the program from MARC, which is the Massachusetts Aggression Reduction Council, and we've moved to second step in grades 4 and 5, and I think next year we'll move to second step for all 3. But she does between 4 and 6 lessons per class, depending upon the program, and they're not spread out over the year. She picks a chunk of time and comes in, once a week or, twice a week with a certain class and gets through those lessons, and then she moves on. And Rachel's available, as Justine is, to help students multiple times after recess. Kids will come down looking for Rachel, with a friendship problem and wanting to talk it out and figure out how to solve something that may have happened at recess, or someone wasn't kind to someone. And so she does a lot of that work. I certainly help with it. Our behaviorist helps with it, but she leads a lot of the front lines of that. The next 2 items Michelle talked about specifically, we do zones of regulation in some small groups with students, and we also are expanding our use of the social thinking curriculum that Mrs. Kane talked about, and we use the Rate the Problem curriculum as well. And basically what all of those things are trying to do is help students who may have some needs in understanding, what does the problem look like and what did your reaction look like? And let's, give them some quantitative ways to say, okay, well, what's a 1 problem look like and what's a 10 problem look like? And the student says, okay, so maybe this was a 3 problem, and what did your response look like when you lost it and stormed out of class? Well, that was probably an 8 response. So how can we have a response that equals the problem that you were facing? And the zones of regulation, I think Michelle talked about pretty clearly. When we talk about, another thing that I think is hard to quantify at the elementary level is how often we talk about that all students get what they need. And that goes a little bit to the questions that we heard in the previous presentation. But I can't tell you how often I'm in a classroom and a teacher is doing a mini lesson about, some kids I need glasses, some kids need glasses, some kids need a different chair than other kids. And it's all about everybody gets what they need, and how can we be accepting of that, and how can we not make it about us, and why can't I have a wiggle cushion, or why can't I have chew gum at school. Kids get what kids need to be successful at school, and that's a message that we start giving to kids right in 3rd grade, and I know they're doing that at Shaker Lane as well, helping them understand that we're not all the same and that we need to give each other what they need to be successful. Michelle and I are working this year on increasing some of our transition activities for grade 2 students. When we talk about anxiety, a lot of our behavior from children often comes from anxiety, and the building transition can be a challenge for some students. So we've started doing some work on increasing what those transition activities look like, trying to be able to have students put a name with a face, and that's happening from 5th grade to 6th grade as well. Students are going to be able to have an opportunity to come for lunch at the middle school when 6th grade is away at Nature's Classroom. 2nd grade students are going to have lunch with 3rd grade students later in the year. So we're trying to increase or decrease some of the anxiety that a building switch causes for some of our younger kids. That's something that we've worked on, but we're continuing to improve. And when we look at resources and activities, I think you'll find very similar things here to what you saw in Shaker Lane. We do have a guidance counselor. We have a school psychologist assigned almost 100% to Russell Street now, which is a great resource for us to have. We have lunch groups with guidance. with a lot of staff members do lunch groups. I do them, teachers do them, but guidance does them regularly, sort of parent permissioned. Would you like your child to be in a lunch group, type of lunch group? But, I had snack with 2 kids, not long ago, came down and we were looking for an adult to have snack with. So that stuff's going on a lot. We talked about school-wide meeting. We also have a new BCBA who's doing great work at Russell Street, doing some things, working specifically with classes on, one of the things Responsive Classroom has is every group of students, helps create the expectations in the classroom, and they have sort of a cool down spot, and the class names it and decide how they're going to use it. And sometimes students on their own say, I need to go take a break, and I'm going to sit over there for a few minutes. And sometimes the teacher says, why don't you go take a break, and when you're ready, come back. One of the things Nancy Taylor has been doing is working with some classes that needed it on. You can't just go over there and sort of like lounge, so she's put some brain breaks in there, some things for kids to do to sort of like get their mind. One of the things you'll hear from folks who talk about anxiety is, as adults, we might, watch TV or read a book at night if our mind is spinning and we're feeling anxious. So sometimes just giving a student a break if they're feeling anxious isn't helpful because they're just spinning during that whole time. So giving them a Sudoku or an opportunity to color, something that is a brain break that helps them sort of break the emotion that they're feeling about whatever the stimulus at the time that's causing them anxiety. So that's been going on. And you can see here that we've done in the last year and a half, several district-wide professional developments for all of our students, all of our teachers, K to 5, I think K to 12, in these areas, anxiety, executive functioning. And then at Russell Street specifically, Mrs. Taylor did 2 sessions with teachers this year on helping students that are behaviorally challenged succeed in school, and how are we, providing choice for students, holding children accountable, holding the bar high. Just like academics, when we hold the bar high, most students will, with the right supports, most students will meet the bar. So how are we doing that socially, emotionally, as well as we are doing it academically? So I think there's lots of continuity, K to 5, but social emotional learning is still probably the most important thing we do, and we see an increase in mental health issues, we see an increase in medical issues. So this is an area that is not, school's different than school used to be. And so we do a lot of work around this to try to make children and families feel good at school and make sure that we're supporting all students to be successful.
Okay. Questions from Russell Street?
My only question, as you know, I have a 5th grader and a 3rd grader. And the big thing with them right now is technology, and so my son, he doesn't have anything, but he's just like, when can I get an Instagram account? When can I get Facebook? And you may not be able to, it may not be in the Russell Street, but at what age do we start teaching cyber safety and presentations for the...
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We do digital citizenship starting at Shaker Lane. So we've created digital citizenship programs that all of our teachers are working their students through, and then they get a logo that their class has completed all the digital citizenship lessons. So that's one piece of that. As far as devices go, at the middle school, you can start to bring your phone and electronic devices to school up till 5th grade. Students are not permitted to bring those things to school, partially because many of them are not developmentally able to handle those devices yet. We get things like kids taking video on school buses or texting in bathrooms, and things that end up getting them in trouble. But we do. We just did an empowering, we've been doing this series for the last couple of years, Empowering Families 101 at Russell Street, and one of them was on just what you were talking about with parents, not with students, but, do you know what your child's iPhone can do? Do you need help setting the parental controls? Do you want to talk about what apps, are anonymous and those types of things? So we don't do too much of that with children at this level, but we have tried to reach out to parents and start scaffolding in that way. And then I know you'll hear from at least John, but I think Cheryl as well, that they do more formal presentations on cyber safety and what you should and shouldn't post online and that kind of thing. And we do see a wide range of, even at our level, depending upon family expectations of what students have access to as far as accounts go and social media and those types of things. So I think that's a great question. And we are seeing more of that trickle down into our age group. When I became a principal 10 years ago, that was a middle school and up problem. And, the affordability and accessibility of those types of devices and items have brought it down a little bit, for sure.
Thanks.
Sure.
And can I piggyback on that a
Yeah.
little bit? Is the would you call it, digital citizenship curriculum constantly updated with the new technologies and we?
It is. It's pretty new. It was just formally created in the last 2 years. Julie Lord, when she took the position as instructional technologist throughout the district before she became one of our technology directors, was key in creating it. So it hasn't needed a major revamp yet because it's pretty current. But I think absolutely that's a valid point that technology is changing faster than we can probably keep up with all of it. So our tech staff is sort of staying on the cutting edge of that and making sure that we know what our kids need. And then the other technology pieces, as we get to online assessment and MCAS and those types of things, there's all kind of technology pieces that we need to start training our students in and make sure that they're ready for. So the social piece and then the academic piece academically as well.
We also have ISTE standards, which are international standards that are taught K through 12. So that's more or less our reference guide to keep us up to date. They were actually redone a year ago.
Questions for Russell Street?
Good. So sort of continuing my, theme in terms of, as they get to your school, matured a little bit more, but they're also starting to get a little bit more independence in terms of the structure and the other pieces there. And you used an example of after recess, some of them may come down to talk about an issue there. What do we have in place for, I don't want to call it observation, but when they're having their unstructured time there, the other controls to help checkpoint activities that may be going on and needing to identify the ones that won't come to the office to talk about a problem?
Well, the folks that supervise our unstructured times are, whether it be recess or lunch or those types of things, are trained in those areas to let us know. Someone will come and say, so-and-so's been sitting alone at lunch for a couple days. Does anybody know what's up? And so we'll have dialogues about that. So that happens. The other thing we do is if we hear from a child or a teacher or a parent that we may have a concern for a student, what we'll do is someone will go out and specifically observe what's going on with that student, whether it may be a behavioral problem or whether it may be, hey, I'm not sure my child has anyone to play with at recess. We'll go out and send either our guidance counselor or me or our BCBA out to do some observations to kind of say, what does it look like for this child at recess? Do we need to help him or her, get involved in some games or encourage some other kids to play? We're going to be looking next year at a couple different things. One of them is sort of a relaxation space in the building where kids who need a break could go and have dimmer lights and, cushions and that kind of thing. Right now, that's our guidance office, but to try to provide that kind of outlet for kids and as well to provide a little bit of a structured recess environment, which would look like an adult facilitated game. So something like Foursquare or something where if we had kids that needed some support at recess because they were developing social skills, or if we had kids that needed some support because they've displayed that they can't manage themselves in a competitive game or whatnot, we could have an adult leading an activity. And what you'll find when that happens is all of a sudden everybody wants to come play because the adult is there leading the activity. So it ends up being a good opportunity for kids to learn together with a little bit more supervision. One of the things that I think is tough with that seesaw is part of the reason our kids have trouble at recess unstructured is because most of their time is adult guided, whether it's a coach or a teacher or a parent. It's not like it was 20 years ago when kids were, we've had this conversation gone until dark and coming home. So we want them to have the opportunities to make mistakes and solve problems, but we want everybody to be safe and we want to be able to provide the appropriate level of supervision and guidance, and that's always a little bit in flux. But I think it's a point well taken that we want to be keeping our eyes open for kids who may not be engaging. And we have some teachers, Dr. Clenchey, I'm not sure if you guys were on the email, but sent an article not long ago about a teacher that asked her students every Friday, who they might like to sit next to and who they might like to, who they think is a leader in class or whatever. And she wasn't really looking for any of that. She was looking for who never got picked to sit next to someone. And so we have teachers doing those types of things too. So it's not sort of a formal program as much as it is a belief that we want all kids to feel included in part of our school community.
Yeah, it's not that I'm advocating for more structured time or more, it's just in terms of being able to see what's happening and making sure we're not missing the ones that won't self-report.
Absolutely.
The concerns.
Yeah, fair enough. Yep. And that happens. We have times a parent will alert us to a problem and we'll sit with the student will go, everything's fine. you know, and then you need to dig deeper and figure out what's really going on, because some kids don't want to talk about that, and we need to make one of the big conversations that we have with kids is nobody's in trouble. We want to help solve this problem. Our job as adults is to help you solve this problem. Just, you might have made a mistake. It's okay. We're going to figure out how to solve that problem. You know, it's not a punitive conduct system. It really is a system that's designed for every opportunity to have a teachable moment with a student to grow either academically or to grow socially and emotionally.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Scott.
And then they get to the middle school. So at the middle school, we follow the anti-bullying protocol also that everyone else had mentioned. Middle school, I joke about it, but I love middle school level, is all about negotiating relationships with friends, with teachers, it's just this constant learning how to negotiate those relationships. And so the social emotional learning piece, which has been a focus in the district since September 2016. All the teachers have professional development, and it's really a focus of our staff meetings as well. But it's really the umbrella that we live by every day at the middle school. I was sitting in a classroom today where the kids were giving presentations, and the teacher started with talking with the kids about their expectation as presenters, but also their expectation as an audience member, and talking about how some people get nervous when they give a presentation, and how can we be respectful as audience members, and really what was your goal as a presenter, what was your goal as an audience member, and it really sort of shed light on how everybody feels having to get up in front and give a presentation, and some people love it and some people don't, but really, we talk about in the middle school, when something is happening, make it a teachable moment that moment, to not wait until after, to stop and say, you know, these people over here are not really being respectful while we're having this lesson. How can we fix that? How does that feel? And just to take that moment at that time to make it a teachable moment. So really, that's a big focus at the middle school. There is a health curriculum for grades 6 through 8. And it has evolved over the years. She has a wonderful, Trish Bonacore has a great program. The kids have learned, I'm sure the superintendent enjoys this, relaxation strategies that they practice every day, including exercise and yoga. And one of our students has taken it upon himself, 6th grader, to do Friday Flex Yoga. So we announce it during Flex Block on Friday, and he has a full house every Friday with kids that start their Friday with yoga, and he's asked if we could start Mondays with yoga as well. So it's been a wonderful thing for students to learn, and it's full house every time we announce it. We have an advisory program throughout the middle school. It happens every Monday. The lessons are designed specifically for each group. We follow lessons from the book called The Advisory Group. The advisory book, Building a Community of Learners. So it's a small group of kids with each classroom teacher, and some learning assistants have taken on groups as well. And the lesson really is dependent upon what the students in that group want to focus on from week to week. So on occasion, we've had the same lesson for the whole school, but primarily it's what the group wants to focus on. And some of those groups are very successful, some are not very talkative. I happen to have a group of 6th graders who are not very talkative, so it's a little bit of a challenge to come up with something week to week that they will engage in, but we're making progress throughout the year. If you come into the middle school, you'll see there's a bulletin board off to the right that says we are a bucket filling school. At the beginning of the year, I introduced the book, How Full is Your Bucket? There's an adult version of this book and also a children's version of this book. And basically, we recognize good deeds for anybody in the building. So anyone, students, teachers, staff, can fill out a little slip of paper that indicates what somebody's good deed was. I wrote one the other day for a student who asked if I needed help while I was assembling tables in the cafeteria. So that was a good deed that student didn't need to do, but did. And so that goes up on the board. And at the end, our goal is to try to fill the board in the trimester, and then at the end of the trimester, I just randomly choose 3 and those from the bucket, and those students get a little gift card. Very small item, but it's just a random thing. You had asked, Daryl, how we keep on top of things that are going on and the thing that happens at the middle school that I actually adopted, that we have kept intact, is a Thursday team meeting. We meet with every grade level team every single Thursday, and we talk about the students in particular in that grade. And that's really where teachers will say, oh, did you see this person this week? He looks a little sad this week, or this is going on, or I got an email about this. And that really is how we keep on the pulse of what's happening. And oftentimes our discussions are just, has anyone touched base with that student? Because with the more freedoms and responsibilities that students have when they get to middle school, they're sitting in front of a teacher for 49 minutes and then they move on. So those meetings are really important for teachers to be able to say, oh yeah, I pulled him aside, on Monday and had that conversation. And so we really can keep on top of things because of that meeting. And so we try really hard not to ever miss it. In terms of, thanks. In terms of staff resources, we have a full-time school adjustment counselor. Sarah sees students, one by appointment, but also anyone is welcome to drop in at any time and see her. She is available before school, during lunch, and after school as well, almost every day. We have a full-time school psychologist in our building, and that has been a wonderful addition. Our school psychologist is also available for students to go and drop in and see her. And she is part of our Thursday team as well. And she's a very valuable resource. We have access as well to the BCBA that Scott made mention of as well, Nancy Taylor. Having an assistant principal, I have moments when I think back to last year and think, how did I do it without another person? The assistant principal really makes it possible to have visibility in the school all day. So if it's not Jason, it's me, and sometimes it's both of us, but it makes it possible to have visibility throughout the school for the day. So it just is a wonderful addition at the middle school. And we also have the school resource officer, and which is a great addition in our building as well. So our common practices at the middle school, we have Flex Block, which is a dedicated time to connect with students. It's each morning. We also have after-school time, 3 afternoons, because we have a late bus on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. Our school has a lot of students in it after school on those 3 days that we have a late bus. And those are times when students can meet up with, if they're working on a project, they can meet with other kids, but they can also meet in small groups with teachers. And they can also stay after school with teachers. And so to have that extra connection time is really great. We have lunch supervision in the cafeteria. It's monitored by several adults every day, and almost every day, either Jason or I are in the cafeteria. So that's a really good time to just walk around and chat with students, see what's going on. And kids know that we're available then, so that sometimes when a student will say, can I go talk with you in the hallway, because they know that we're available then. We are present every morning in the hallway area at arrival, every afternoon at dismissal, and also in the hallways during transition times. We really try to get out and about in the building when students are moving about. Again, that's times when kids are, no longer walking with the teacher. When they get to middle school, they just move. And so it's really good to have students and the principal and assistant principal visible during those times. We also have planned activities for students to give them opportunities to socialize. It's hard to figure out at the middle school level what are appropriate activities for students to socialize. So 7th and 8th grade, certainly we have dances that include 7th and 8th grade. 6th grade, PTA has a 6th grade kids night out that they run 4 times or 3 times during the year. It's a wonderful event. And the 6th graders just 6th graders come out together and they play games in the gym. We have a bouncy house at the last one, so that's really exciting. That's coming up at the beginning of June. So that's a really age-appropriate activity for kids. They take their shoes off, they run around and play games, and some kids just sit quietly and talk with their friends, but it's very age-appropriate. This year, we had several guest speakers, one on bullying prevention early in the year, and then bullying prevention and awareness, and then we just recently had Randy Pierce, who talked about perseverance. In the other common practices that I forgot to put on the slide, we also do the SOS screening, and I know we've talked about that here before, the signs of suicide screening in grade 7. And we also do the youth risk behavior survey for grades 6 and 8. That's every other year, and that's data that we use, that we analyze to see if there's any changes we can make to our programs. And I think that's it. Any questions?
Questions or comments for Melissa?
I'll jump in. A lot of everything that you guys have all talked about is prevention and talking about, addressing like the entire community. But there's always, kids who need that extra help, whether they're the bullies or they have, extra anxiety or anything like that. And I'm a little curious to know, what do we do to help those specific kids? Because I think those are the kids that definitely will need the most help. And do we, I know it's going to differ at the age levels too, but what kinds of measures, you hear a lot of kids like getting in trouble and having to go to the principal's office, but I think, a lot of people nowadays want to hear that their children are all being treated with compassion and, because you never know what's going on at home or whatever.
Yeah. So I find it really interesting, and I had to get used to this at the beginning of last year. I was probably only a couple of days into the school year on my first year last year, and someone called me in the evening and said, why didn't you tell me that my child was in the office today? And I thought, if I called every time a child was in the office, and so my office, the whole office area at the middle school is really an open place where kids can come. And I invite the kids. I have lots of cool stuff in my office, and I want kids to come in there and talk. And so there's lots of times during the day that I have a little sticky note on my office door saying, I came by and your door was closed, and then I go and find that child. And so it's a rare time that I don't have students in there that are either coming to tell me that they went to the Red Sox game, or I'm really nervous about a presentation that's coming up. And so I spend a lot of my day really reaching out individually to kids to come and talk. The other day I made a reference, and I was really sad that the student didn't get it, because I am door number 1, Sarah is door number 2, and Jason is door number 3. And when I said the door reference, the kid was like, I thought it was hysterical, and the kid did not get it at all. Who would you like, door number 1? So I'm like, okay, door number 3, just go there. So we spend a lot of the day, and if Jason were here, he would tell you the same. We spend a lot of the day at the middle school goes by very fast, because there's always students in for one reason or another. And so I feel like we really do, I pride myself on doing a really good job at reaching out to kids and having them come into the office and talk. Do you want to talk to the other student? Do you want to try to hash this out? Do you want a person to listen? Do you want a private space to have that conversation? Like I said, the negotiating of friendships, it's all about being in the circle. And I say it every single day when I'm talking about students. On any given day, someone's kicked out of the circle, and then it's try to figure out how to get back in the circle. And it's unfortunate they can't just make the circle a little bigger, but they get better at making the circle bigger when they get more towards 8th grade, but in 6th grade and 7th grade, it tends to be a tight circle, and someone's on the outside every day. And kids understand today's my day to be on the outside, and I have to figure out how to get back in. And so we really have conversations with kids about how did your behavior make the other student feel, and how will you do it? What would you do differently next time? We have lots of those conversations every day.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to change the grade level of my question as I move along here. So historically, I think probably particularly at 6th and 7th, and you mentioned even at 8th grade, they figure it out a little bit more there. It's sort of a powder keg of emotions, new freedoms. The devices are now in the school type of thing. It ties back to the digital safety pieces there. But at the same time, we really only have them for 5 or 6 hours, right? And then there's a substantial amount of time outside of the school. What do we do for bridging between, what's happening outside versus inside, because it's probably a lot of the outside activities that heavily influence the day portion of that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I can talk a little bit about, most of that happens on social media in middle school. And so, we really we do the digital citizenship also, and recently I added a section to to my weekend update called Social Media Spotlight, with books and different apps and just things for parents to be aware of. But we really talk to the kids about safety with their phones. As things come up, we talk about that a lot. In the middle school, our protocol this year, we piloted it a little bit last year, and I actually got a call last week from this random person I didn't know, and she said, I heard about this program that you have at your school. Tell me about it. And so we have clear plastic shoe bags that have 24 pockets, and there's one in every classroom. And when the students go into the classroom, they're expected to take their phone and put it in the pocket. So so that they still have it, they're allowed to have it, but it's in the classroom and it's away from them. If the teacher wants them to use their phone for something, and there's lots of apps that kids can use, they can play games, interactive games on smart boards with their phones. And so if the teacher has planned an activity where they're using their phone, the teacher will say, your phone comes out to your desk, but otherwise it is in the pocket. And that has eliminated a lot of the exchanges that go on in the building, because if during a 49-minute class period, technically, unless they're using their phone for a class activity, it shouldn't be on their person. And then we really do stress lunchtime is a good time to connect with mom or dad, or if you have to make a different plan for after school, you have to text or email and touch base with home, that's a good time to do that. And I also ask parents to use that time as well. I have a pouch on a pocket on my door where if you're using your phone inappropriately, it shows up on my door, and I cannot tell you how many times all throughout the day the phone is beeping and it's mom. So we have to make that point too, that even that connectedness, you can be connected all day, but during the school hours, you should refrain from texting back and forth. And so we really try to have that be a lunchtime thing. A lot of what happens outside of school, as you mentioned, that comes back in, is social media stuff that happens at night. Kids are up texting late at night, or they don't use their best judgment in things that they say or do on social media, and that we have to address individually. I try to contact parents every time and let them know that an issue has come up when it's with a child's phone. And the best that we can do is continuously educate kids. This is moving, like Scott said, really quickly, and so by the time I'm figuring out how that app that it's old news, they're not even using it anymore, they're onto something else. And the part that scares me all the time, and that we talk about a lot at the middle school, is how anonymous people can be in the things that they put out on social media, and the kids need to really understand that aspect of, when you say something, when you put something out there, it can be attached to you, or if you wouldn't say it to somebody's face, why would you put it on your phone? And so we really have to have those conversations about that a lot at the middle school, frankly. And we really try to do education with parents too, because students, like you said, like Matt said, your kids want these things. They want them at a young age, but they're really not, in middle school, they're not entirely responsible and independent enough, not everyone, to be able to use it responsibly.
I'm not sure all adults
are
probably
responsible
not either.
You should see some of the things Mike posts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from this? Thank you, Cheryl.
Good evening. Social emotional learning, as you all know, is a strategic plan priority and embedded in all our school improvement plans. And our school council and faculty, school leadership team at the high school are actively discussing how we can continue to get better in our programming, our activities, our professional development in this particular area of priority. So we expect to see some significant updates in our next school improvement plan that'll be rolled out pretty soon. But to start with, I'm happy to hear all the wonderful things happening at the younger grades at the high school. I think we're the beneficiary of that. We see the results of that in terms of our general student conduct. We're proud of our students at the high school in general. You know, I think if I was to look for comparisons between other schools, I think we stand out as a wonderful school community with excellent students who care about each other for the most part. We certainly have our challenges. We have our discipline issues. That's not to gloss over. Significant mental health issues at the high school. Students who struggle with anxiety and stress and workload and things like that, and just the management of their lives or difficult family situations. We have all that. I'm not looking at it with rose-colored glasses, but I do think we see evidence of the hard work that's done at the younger grades at the high school. And certainly, I think Cheryl would give testimony to that, all the hard work that Scott's doing at Russell Street and the faculty there are doing. You're the beneficiary of that, and then Scott would say the same with Michelle and what Rich did prior to you at Shaker Lane, the HEART program. And so that thread that runs through the district, I think comes to fruition at the high school. But nonetheless, we definitely consider social emotional learning a priority. We're actively discussing it with the faculty, parents, and here at school committee. One of the things, I'll just highlight some things that you may already know about. We have a morning advisory that starts the day. Essentially, you might recall this as homeroom. It's a 5-minute period. We have discussed this on and off for the last 5 years of how we could do maybe a 20-minute mod. We looked at schedule. We had a scheduling committee, and it was typical school fashion. It was difficult to come to consensus on it. We're still discussing how we might embed a 20-minute advisory here or there, or an activity period. We do have extended advisories each month. There's a tremendous competition for time, instructional time in the school day. And there's all these competing priorities. But I think we do a fairly good job of managing the balance of academics along with other enriching programs throughout the school year. I think if I were to make a list, provide you with a list of all the things we've done over just the last 10 years at the high school, it's quite extensive, all the enriching activities that happen that support, enhance, or supplement, or have nothing really to do with academics. Morning advisory, though, is that morning time. It's 5 minutes each day. The minutes add up, though, if students are there on time. It adds up where they can spend time connected to a faculty member. They're assigned to advisories in freshman year, and they stay with that advisory teacher all 4 years. And the research shows that is pivotal to having students feel connected to community. And I think we have a fairly strong community. We can certainly get better, but one of the things that helps that is that morning connection. Some students don't really develop a bond with their advisory teachers, but some develop a tremendous bond. And it's, when they graduate, they're in tears hugging their advisory teacher saying, I'm going to miss you so much. I've spent the last 4 years every, 5 days a week with you through the school year. So the morning advisory is an important part of how we start the school day with the morning ritual. With announcements and things like that, and a time to connect in community. We have extended advisories, which have a variety of educational programs. Some of the highlights just in the past year have emphasized things like the green team, but it could be driving safety, it could be the SOS screening, a YRBS survey, assembly related to LGBT or human rights. It could be assembly related to executive skills, or we've certainly done anti-bullying programs, particularly in the 9th grade during an extended advisory. We do have a required health curriculum with an anti-bullying unit that's embedded, so we make sure that every student has been instructed in anti-bullying programming. We have a bullying prevention and intervention plan as part of the state requirement and also the district requirement. And we have, I think Michelle highlighted this pretty well, the investigatory procedures or investigation procedures that you mentioned at Shaker Lane are similar at the high school. There's a district process on how we manage it. Of course, it would look different in terms of the intensity of the situation and probably involvement with police at the high school if it was a really involved situation. And we've had a few over the years for sure that did require the support or assistance of an SRO to help resolve it because some of the bullying was happening online and we needed the police ability to help with that investigation piece. So, the SRO is a really important part of the school community, and especially in this regard, in bullying prevention, intervention when there's something that happens. But we really, I think you heard from a lot of us tonight that the emphasis really is on the prevention piece, trying to keep it from happening, by recognizing how we treat each other according to our core values, particularly the ones at the high school related to respect and responsibility. And I think our teachers do a good job of emphasizing good classroom management practices and talking about having clear principles or boundaries or rules for how students conduct themselves while they're in class. We get a lot of compliments when we get visitors from other school communities, parents from other places, about how our students are acting in the halls or how they were greeted. They often compliment our students, and I think that's a testimony to the program, and it happens at the younger grades to develop good citizenship. Student support teams. We have student support team meetings. This is similar to all the other schools. At the other schools, they may call them child study teams, but this is related to a team that I'd like to increase the amount of meetings. We meet every other week. I think it needs, at this point, based on just the concerns that are that I have, we should be meeting every week actively as a team. And this is made up of the clinical staff, of the guidance counselors, the school psychologist, a regular ed teacher, an administrator, assistant principal in this case, to talk about students who are struggling with attendance issues, behavioral issues, academic issues, and planning interventions. And this is part of also our pre-referral process before we have to necessarily get to a special education referral, where we can design interventions at a different tier and look at a DCAP, look at the district curriculum accommodation plan, and see how we can help a kid who's struggling academically, or look at how we notified the parents in a formal way related to, and held a meeting related to a student who's struggling with attendance, or students who's out for extended period of time related to medical issues. What are we doing there to support that student, their family, with home or hospitalization and tutoring that's needed, or online learning? Recently, a couple of years ago, we were able to add a tutoring center with Kathy Ledoux, who's a licensed teacher, but she works as a tutor in our tutoring center, and she does a fantastic job of each morning throughout the day, helping kids who might need a little assistance. She herself is skilled at executive functions in terms of teaching it to students. We also have volunteer tutors from the community. Ray Streeter comes in and tutors mathematics a couple days a week, and he's been doing that for years. And we have peer tutoring happen in the tutoring center that's coordinated through Kathy. But that's another way of supporting students. Transitional vocational program. This is a new program that is there for some of our most vulnerable students who need help, who aren't necessarily significant special needs, whom are going perhaps right to community for job. They need vocational training. They need some basic skills, life skills training, and Michelle Hirth, a teacher in the last couple of years, has done a nice job of building up that program that's adjacent to the cafeteria. Other programmatic resources and activities are, if we could just switch the slide, are related to anti-bullying presentations that we have. They don't necessarily happen every year. We want to make sure the students experience at least a couple of times the formal presentations in the assembly. We'd like to embed it so that every 9th grade gets it, so we can be sure that students had a formal presentation on that. We also have had the assistant district attorney come in from Middlesex County and give cyber safety presentations for both parents and students. We're due for that to happen again. It's a very important part. I think it's been spoken to quite well already. We have driver safety presentations. There's another one coming up this month with important reminders related to how students conduct themselves when they're particularly related to prom and other graduation activities, but at any time. We have substance prevention presentations. We had a recent one in partnership with the Littleton Coalition Against Addiction. And we have the signs of suicide screenings that I've already mentioned. That's a really important part of intervening with students who might be depressed or, giving early indicators that they're just not, they're just struggling with issues and they need some support. And our counselors do an extraordinary effort each time this is administered. We administer it at the high school in the 9th and the 12th grade each year. And that's unique to Littleton, I think. I mean, there are other towns that do it, for sure, but I think we're in the minority probably that actually administer the survey, and it's been an established survey that goes back prior to my arrival here, and I think it's directly due to the efforts of the former school nurse Barbara Whitcomb, who's still very involved in this program locally and supporting families who struggle with this. The youth risk behavior surveys are done at each grade level every other year, and you get formal presentations on that. You recently had one. The National School Climate Survey was administered last year, and we expect to give a presentation prior to the end of this school year to the school committee. We first want to present the results to our faculty, and so we're planning on doing that in May, so we can use that to inform our next school improvement plan and discuss ideas related to the climate survey. Staff resources, we have school counselors, school psychologist, tutoring center coordinator, I already mentioned, our assistant principal. Cheryl, I think, highlighted a lot of the qualities of these people and what they bring to a school community. So I won't repeat that because it's really similar at the high school. We have access to a BCBA who's been phenomenal to work with. I'm very grateful for his efforts over the last few years. I've learned a lot from him. I think we all have as a faculty, and he's helped advise us on how to intervene with some of our most serious situations. We have registered behavior technicians now. They used to be called ABAs, Applied Behavior Analysts, and this new certification program has been really helpful. A lot of our educational assistants have sought it, and it's helped them become better at classroom management and better at intervening in situations before they become an issue. Of course, we've already mentioned the school resource officer, who provides a variety of assistance each day, whatever it might be, but sometimes it's just making informal connections with kids. And that's that partnership that Darryl was talking about, like with the outside of school stuff. A lot of the things that are happening out of school, because of our memorandum of understanding with the police department, a lot of the things that are happening outside of school or in the school are communicated with the police and the school officials as needed, related to serious issues. And we're grateful to have that partnership with the police department and their support of this position. School resource officer also helps us with providing presentations to the students each September related to our ALICE protocols, which are active threat scenario or shelter-in-place scenarios. And we go over this each September as an overview for students and faculty each year. Our most recent one was on February 27th, in the aftermath of Parkland, where we returned from school vacation and felt it was necessary to give an overview to all classes at class meetings. And that was done twice this year. We are considering and talking about drills. It's not really at this point an option for us. We're certainly feeling that there were issues related to scheduling prior to Parkland, but we know now that we need to address that as promptly as we can before the end of the school year with all classes to do some type of drill scenario. And I've reassured all the students and staff about this already at the class meetings. All right, so that's next is recent professional development. I'll let you take a look at that, but these are things that probably resonate or connect exactly with what the other schools have already mentioned. Managing and changing challenging classroom behavior. We had a specialist come and present on that. We've had several presentations from a renowned expert, Jessica Minhan, on reducing stress and anxiety in students. So these are things that our staff have been trained in over the course of the years. Our staff have also had training in yoga and mindfulness for teachers and students. And we have had a heavy emphasis for a number of years now on growth mindset and resiliency and perseverance. And integrating social emotional learning into classroom practices and school climate, the superintendent was able to bring in a local expert at the beginning of the school year, Dr. Naja Riley, to kick off our all-district meeting. All the faculty, all the administrators from the district were assembled on the first day of school back to hear a presentation on social emotional learning and how to integrate it into classroom practices and school climate. That's how we started our school year. So that's where I'll end the presentation and be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Dr. Harrington? Yeah.
I don't have a question except the comment that I've been waiting to get to after this presentation to say, which is just that I think that this is a great example that we can spend this amount of time giving an overview of the comprehensive types of programs that our public schools offer to students, from social emotional to bully prevention to handling a student who just needs someone to talk to. I think it's really encouraging. I don't think we talk about it enough, the breadth of these programs, and I think it's great that we've taken the time to let the community know what these programs are that are out there. I'm really proud that we put such an emphasis on social emotional learning. The 4 years I've been on the school committee, I don't know how many times I've heard Kelly or our administrative team talk about that. I think it's a huge problem, nationwide in society, so I'm glad that we're putting the kind of emphasis on it that we are. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to, a lot of the stuff that we've talked about is stuff going above and beyond, right? Beyond the job description of, sitting down and having lunch when otherwise you'd be, doing something else, paperwork, or, I don't want to minimize the work to just paperwork or meeting with kids, but, point taken. So really wanted to just pause and say, we've now just listed dozens of opportunities that students have to develop in these areas, and I'm really proud of what we do.
Yeah, I noticed that Susan Harvey was here earlier tonight. I want to give a shout out to Susan too, because one of the things that it's at the heart of her teaching is the humanitarian approach. And so the humanitarian club, I think that the students that get involved in that club each year really create an amazing feeling in our building each year. You see all the tweets. I think aside from athletics, Susan's right up there with active tweets related to all the initiatives she does to build community and build good citizenship and build a sense of compassion in our students. So I want to give her credit for that. She's also been involved with Best Buddies, and Tracy Turner is involved with that at the high school, and we had the superintendent spoke to that recently about the impact it had on him attending the Best Buddies talent show. Those in this community service thing, a requirement, but our students exceed that. So many of our students, it was a 50-hour requirement, but we have students who are getting hundreds of hours of community service. So I just want to give a shout out to that, because I neglected to mention that, because that's part of the connection, and that's where you see the evidence of it in the clubs, the teams, and the sportsmanship, and the awards we get for sportsmanship and athletics. It's having an impact on how our kids treat each other, the social emotional learning.
And to that point, I made a promise, I think it was a year ago, to stop talking about the fact that I graduated from Littleton High School, but I think I'm probably one of the few people in the room who has actually experienced this kind of stuff. So with my time, with my time dwindling and becoming nostalgic with that, and I'll say that it is totally true. And I think one of the things I find interesting is that a lot of these things that you've gone through and named in their programs, and they've got names and acronyms and stuff like that, it doesn't feel like you're being put through these different programs, which I remember thinking, that it's happening to you, but it doesn't feel like you're sitting down now to talk about this specific topic, right? Like, it just is part of the community, and it's totally true. I tell the story all the time about how, we used to play sports teams or ride on the bus with other people or talk to friends from other school districts, and nobody had the kind of relationship that classmates had with other classmates that they weren't really close with, and with the faculty and with the administration that Littleton had. And we used to think it was the strangest thing when we'd sit on a bus and listen to these other kids talk about what was going on in their school district, because we were like, wow, that is just not our experience. So, that's...
I have that same experience when I talk to other
principals. I'm sure you do, yeah. So,
they're like, what do you do? Yeah. So, thank you.
I have
Either
one, but go ahead.
No, you go first.
All right,
That way
so
I can finish
I got
up.
3. So
I got one.
Oh, no, well,
You win.
yeah.
Just so you can go
Darn.
first, get it out of the way.
Oh, yeah, get me out of the way, is that what it is?
Took that the wrong way there.
Yeah, I know it. So, again, I think, probably by the time they hit high school, they're kind of, I bet all of you have observed how they come into your school and then how they go out of the school, how they're quite grown up in terms of their they're not quite set when they get to your
they're not.
piece there, but by the time they graduate, the young adults moving on. However, I think typically at high school, the stress and anxiety pieces really start coming into play a lot more.
It is.
There with the stresses of approaching graduation, whether they have the tools or not to deal with that. But I think that typically manifests itself the greatest turmoil in terms of the students themselves there, and potential negative outcomes as a result of that.
We see it.
Yeah.
We see it every week. There's no glossing over that every week.
Yeah, so as I look at it in terms of, I saw your things here, and I guess when I remember back on certain things there, it's, you get the presentations and maybe it's wah, 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 kind of thing there. And you have the surveys, which are, it's a survey of things there. I'm more interested a little bit more on what you're doing in between those in terms of the, I call it active protocols on your part
Right.
for catching the ones that really, I went to the presentation, I checked my hour off, but it didn't stick. It didn't help, and it didn't help with the anxiety problems or the behavioral activities.
One of the things that helps a lot, because kids are, I think that some of my colleagues spoke to this, the adolescents are often reticent about sharing whatever, they want the principal necessary, or the school to know what's going on and what they're really thinking. It often comes out in the most significant cases, either through a journal writing that is seen by a teacher or something, or seen by a parent, or seen by a sibling, and the parents alert and calls the school for support. We often get alerted by parents that their child needs additional assistance because of something we didn't know about. But more often than not, and this is a testimony to our students, and they look out for each other. Just this weekend, I received an email from a guidance counselor in regards to something she had been notified by another student that he was notifying that he was concerned about someone who was feeling really down about something recently. Intervention was done really promptly. This was a student who was not on anyone's radar for any particular issue. It wasn't on counseling or anything like that. And it was dealt with really delicately, discreetly. The student received an opportunity to talk to someone, a guidance counselor, and get support. The parent was notified over the weekend, off hours. That happens often on the weekend. And I can tell you, now having been principal almost 10 years, that happens frequently, where I'm notified of something on a weekend or in the evening by a counselor. We're communicating. I was talking to Jan Nolan on Good Friday. It was a day off from school, and she was calling me, and we were talking about a kid. And that's the uniqueness of Littleton that Mike was talking about, that we are keeping a close eye on our kids, but it's cliche, I know, but we use it a lot in Littleton, that how much it takes a village to tend to the kids and make sure that they grow, in a way that's full of good character, but grow safely and finish school. And I think that's the kind of thing. We have these, we're always kind of watching the kids, but the connections that a lot of our teachers and counselors develop with kids, it has allowed for kids to feel really comfortable going forward, talking to Mr. Christie or talking to Mrs. Nolan, reaching out to Mrs. Benulo, who's the guidance secretary now, and Mrs. Cormier before her, and letting them know that there's a concern or something that they need help with. But often it's that communication piece is really instantaneous. They know that, as the assistant principal don't feel bothered at all when you call. We want to know. We've created that culture in the school, that we want to know what's going on and help kids if there's a need. So I hope that helps a lot.
Yeah, no, because it really strikes me in terms of, we talk about what we present to the students and in the other pieces there, but it's the other parts of the school community that I think really is critical in terms of being able to really understand what's happening, and then how are we using that information to lead towards a positive outcome.
I think it's the kids that are under the radar are the ones that we didn't necessarily know about, are the ones we often worry about because we don't know. But there's other kids. There are kids with some significant mental health issues that we're actively getting through school. The supports are in place. The school psychologist was provided a few years ago through the efforts of the school committee, and that's been instrumental in helping kids who sometimes can get into crisis. And that is beyond the stress that generalized stress and anxiety that we see a lot of kids exhibit today. And that there's also co-occurring depression in a lot of kids. But one of the things we're definitely keeping a watchful eye on are all the kids. But I can tell you, just in giving testimony to you tonight, with all this emphasis on all the positives, one of the things we're really struggling with are the kids with really intense mental health issues. And it's not just here in Littleton. It's absolutely everywhere. It's across the country. Every principal, when they get together, is talking about it. And I think there's going to be a resource request, no doubt, coming your way probably in the near future for the next budget after this one related to that, perhaps for some additional supports for the high school. So we'll talk more about that as the year unfolds. But, I wanted to make sure that we're giving a positive report tonight of all the wonderful things our staff are doing to support kids. but there's certainly area for improvement and need for resources in certain areas.
And then my last one here. So, do we take any time to sort of, we talked about the building of the programs as they go through the grades here, and then you get it sort of like at the end and where it all comes together before they leave. Are we doing anything reflectively back through the system here in terms of things that we're seeing at the high school and whether we need to adopt or adapt anything at our lower grade programs to help address issues? Because by the time they're at high school, they're kind of set.
Yeah, I'd like to comment, because I was listening to some of the things that Scott and Michelle were saying, and of course Cheryl, but Cheryl and I, are in probably more frequent communication because of the next level, and also the fact that we worked so closely together for a number of years. But when I was listening to Michelle and Scott mention some things, I wrote down some things. I didn't, some of the aspects of their curriculum, I said, ooh, we should do like that with, I was thinking of individual kids or groups and some of the programs that they were mentioning. Just not, we wouldn't replicate it exactly. It would be age appropriate. But there's certainly elements of the things that they're doing at their schools that we could learn from. So I think we'll be talking about that. I took some notes on that. And I'm sure we'll share, as we do every summer at our administrative retreats, on what we can do in common and in tandem to promote social emotional learning in all our schools.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a good point. When we think about our curriculum, we can measure the effectiveness by doing assessments, looking at test grades, school grades, where they get into college, things like that. But how do we measure the effectiveness of the program that we're doing in terms of social and emotional learning? How do we could do it with things like if there's fewer bullying incident reports, if there's fewer, mental health issues happening, great. But most of the stuff that we're talking about tonight is more subjective. So how as a staff, administrative team, are we thinking about, this program has worked for a while, is there anything out there that's better? What should we be tweaking? How are we doing it?
Well, there are definitely quantitative measures, but when you look at social and emotional learning, there's a lot of qualitative data. So it's a lot of observation. I know when I go to schools, I look for a myriad of things. And social and emotional learning, strategies that their teachers are using in the classroom, how the kids are reacting with each other. That's the feedback that I use, and then have conversations, larger conversations with my administrative team. So we're always looking at it's constant. I mean, there isn't a day in a week that there isn't some type of conversation about social and emotional learning or academics. I mean, it's about educating the whole child, and if we see something as emerging, then we figure out a solution to deal with that particular situation. A responsive classroom at Russell Street has been a tremendous asset to this district, and parts of that program can be used at the primary school and also at the high school.
Mm-hmm.
It just needs to be age appropriate. I think it's the best character education program I've ever seen in my career. So those kinds of investments, once you've done your homework, pay off many, many times. So it's not as if you can put a piece of paper down and have an assessment. It's an ongoing assessment, and make sure that your targets are being met. Number of referrals to the office. I'm glad Cheryl had mentioned that we have many kids that come to the office, not because they're in trouble. I mean, maybe 30 years ago, that's the way offices used to be run. That's not the case anymore. Kids come down to talk, communicate, share, and that's what we want. That's how we build relationships and build a positive culture.
I just wanted to add a piece to, Daryl, to your question about throughout the schools. We also have a clinical team comprised of the guidance counselors, school adjustment counselors, school psychologists, and that's K-12. And they meet regularly together as a group to discuss, issues throughout. And that's put together recently in the past few years, and that's a really good group, and that's a way to kind of connect that thread through the core building.
I'd also like to add that they get clinical support supervision from an outside clinical psychologist once a month also, and that's a new addition this year because that is important to run challenging cases by someone else, and we also use that individual sometimes for assessments that we need on some of our students in district, as well as we go out and sometimes get risk assessments when we need them also for students.
Jen, questions?
So yeah, thank you for all the programs, but you guys have all, sorry, you guys have all mentioned. All those being said, I'm just fielding a lot of questions from parents, and
Sure.
I've heard a lot of feedback that, in general, there are maybe specific parents that, but feel that there's still punishments for bad behavior rather than collaborative problem solving. Or punitive punishments for things like, one parent in particular was talking about, a kid being late, not because of his fault, but, getting detentions or something. And I think those are the kinds of things that parents are wondering, what kinds of things
Yeah,
are
we're
we...
pretty lenient when it comes to tardies, actually, in comparison to most schools. But,
Okay.
we were asked by, lots of people to actually ramp up our enforcement of attendance. So, yeah, I think you have to, related to tardies, I think, after your 5 tardies or something, it triggers a detention.
But also in terms
Yeah.
of, unsatisfactory behavior in a classroom setting too.
Yeah, it can result in detention, absolutely. We still have that. Our detentions are quite small. And there was a year where the detention monitors we had teachers who volunteered, but they didn't get any students, and they were like, "Why? Where are the students? Why don't we get what?" They felt like they weren't needed, after school, because we had teachers who were volunteering to monitor, but they weren't getting a lot of students sent to them. I think that's amped up a little bit because we do have one of our charges is to help students develop socially appropriate behaviors. And we certainly have adolescents who can take unnecessary risks, be inconsiderate at times, be disrespectful of a teacher or students in class. I don't want to finish on a negative note, but there are things that require that intervention. But generally, we'll try a softer approach with a talk or a warning and that kind of thing. But it can result in, especially with repeated misconduct and disregard for guidance and counsel, if it persists, there is sometimes a negative consequence. That's classic and old-fashioned detention, where you're restrained. You're kept not restrained. You're kept after school. You're detained for 45 minutes after school, and that does happen. We have in-school suspension. We have out-of-school suspension. I have a recent case that absolutely, there's no question about it, required an out-of-school suspension, and also resulting in a risk assessment for the student. So, there's things like that will require more severe consequences, and I feel completely comfortable with our approach. I think we always try to look at students. We have the superintendent has spoken to this phrase, but it's a discipline with dignity approach. Compassion is always the first approach. And the other favorite phrase, not to keep giving Kelly shout-outs, but one of the things that he says is, seek first to understand rather than be understood. So we take that approach when we're trying to grapple with kids who are dysregulated, not necessarily exhibiting good self-control. I can tell you that's part of my daily experience as a principal and has been for over 20 years. So, and we teach them, and hopefully they're better at it by the time they graduate.
And I hope we haven't given the impression that consequence isn't a part of what may happen. But the difference is, many, many years ago, there was a consequence, but nothing else happened.
Yeah.
Now, there may be a consequence, but then there's a discussion and some follow-up in terms of, how could have you handled this situation better? So, I mean, we're not saying, and please don't anybody take it that way, that consequences are never given. That can't happen. When they walk out our doors out of high school, there are going to be consequences if they do certain things. And our job is to prepare all of our students to be successful as they go out into the world.
And one of the things
pursue their dreams.
we take great pride in, and I think, assistant principal I have now, I've tried to emphasize with him that, because in charge, he's primarily dealing with the daily discipline of the building, but I've tried to emphasize that when a student, violates values of the school or rules, and doesn't show good behavior, that there might be a consequence. There's certainly counsel and guidance, but we move on from it. one of the things that we take great pride in, and we emphasize this with our faculty, is that if a student has a misstep or makes a mistake, or just it has a bad day and loses his temper or her temper, and is out of sorts, they are welcome back to our community after that with a smile, and we move on from it. There's no grudge kept or anything like that. And I think, I've had a fair amount of alumni now who would say that, remember that when they see me, remember that time when I was, you weren't there, but your brothers were. But remember that time, back when I did this and that, and we joke about it today. And we got past it the next day, though. We move on. And then if we have recurring behavior, that's an indicator of something else that requires more serious attention.
Yeah, a couple more. Very specific question from a parent. If a weapon's brought to school, how might this be handled? What are the protocols for at school, and how parents are notified afterward?
Yeah, okay. Well, if a weapon's brought to school, certainly it's a serious offense. I don't know exactly what you mean by weapon. One of the things I would urge, though, is that if parents have serious questions like that, they should really call me directly, not wait to have it at the school board. But I'm happy to answer the question. We have rules. It's in our handbook how we handle that. That would result in a suspension, a possible expulsion hearing, depending on the severity of the weapon. I have had a student who, my first year here as principal, brought a small knife to school, and he was suspended. His parents were very involved with me in the proceedings, the follow-up. Sometimes, if there's a mental health component piece to it, we have to, look at it through a therapeutic lens and try to see what we can do to help. Or sometimes the student felt unsafe, and that can be that's actually quite serious, because the student might have an intention to use it. And it's not just that they accidentally left it they were on a work site, because that can happen. Oh my God, I left my Swiss Army knife or this other, knife, from fishing in a bag or something, which would be odd, right? So we have to gotta look past the story. But in terms of a parental notification, there's a confidentiality piece of disclosure of a student identity. So we have to maintain that. If there was a significant weapon, though, such as a gun, I've sent out advisories about lesser things this year. Small little tools that we found that we weren't sure if it was a little shell casing, right? I've sent out at least 2 of those, if not 3, in the time I've been principal here, and we found out the recent one was from a funeral for a grandfather who passed away, and a kid had kept it as a memento, and it fell out of his bag. From a 21 gun a salute, and then the most recent one was from a tool, like a hammer set or whatever. I forget the actual name for it. Nail gun. Thank you. But there was an actual name though. I forgot the name. The nail gun. And it was just a piece of it, but it looked like it could have been part of a shell. And so that we sent out a notification for.
To all the parents, right? What happened?
Yeah.
Right.
So you can imagine the level of communication. We would probably be having a press conference if there was potentially, if there was a weapon. I think the news media would jump on that, potentially, right? Maybe not. It all depends on the circumstances of the case.
There's just a myriad of things, and if it was a serious offense, the police would be involved, and we would be doing a joint press release.
Police are involved automatically when it's a weapon. If it's a weapon. Okay.
I think this question probably came up, was it Malden or Melrose? After that
yes,
incident?
I heard about what happened there.
I think that's probably where it was.
Yep, I can tell you that if Kelly Glenshee got a call from me, that there was a...
It was Medford.
It was
Medford? Yeah.
I was in the theater, and we were cleaning, and we found, this particular item. And I don't know exactly the particulars of what happened in Medford, but if it was a weapon, I don't know what it was. A magazine, we would notify, yep. That we would have notified people, because we've notified them about lesser things.
And then one final question regarding the school resource officer. How long is the person in school?
The person is shared across the buildings.
Okay.
Yep, and the person's on duty every day. And because of the shared role, though, and we certainly would advocate, in the future as we look at school safety. There's an intense scrutiny right now underway for all things related to school safety. I would be very much in support at some point in being able to have an additional school resource officer, but I know there's resource constraints on that, and that takes time. So how to figure it out, how we could, share two instead of one. But right now we're sharing one, and we're very grateful for what we have because that person is an important part of our school community.
Chief King and I have had conversations about how do we increase visibility of the police department in our schools, and Chief King has been gracious enough to assign another employee part-time K-5. So, we're very cognizant of looking at situations around the nation and making decisions as a result of what we're seeing. I guess another comment I could make, and we have this happen, and we just don't talk about it a lot, but our police are very connected to us. They may stop in, have a coffee. They may stop in to read a book to a class. Having a police cruiser in front of a school is a good thing, and it sends a message.
Yes.
So you don't necessarily have to put a bunch of people in your school. It's about knowing that the police are around and they can be there very quickly. So I think we're looking at a lot of things as we review our safety plans. And you've heard tonight presentations that really focus on being proactive and having students feel connected. That's key. All of the research that I read on this, and I've read a lot of it lately, will say that connectiveness, having an adult that a student feels safe and they trust, is paramount to helping students. Students that are struggling socially and emotionally, and they have mental health challenges, need to have access to those resources as quickly as possible. Those things make a tremendous difference in keeping our schools and our communities safe. There's a common theme in 99% of the articles that I've read, and they really aren't advocates of making our schools harder. They're advocates of making our schools softer, which means providing those supports to students, intervention at a very early part of what we observe, and making sure that we're cognizant that we need to be watchful of what our kids are doing, and not in a negative way. If we see a student sitting and eating lunch by themselves, that's a cause for us to look into. I was just out of school the other day and went to see the principal. I was in a presentation and I noticed a student who was sitting all by herself. So I went in and talked to the administration, found out who it was, and then a process began. So I think it's, for lack of a better word, being vigilant. And it's not just us as a school system. The whole community needs to be vigilant. If you see something that's off, you need to report it to the police. Or you need it, it depends on what it is, or report it to one of us. Being part of the solution and understanding that it takes a whole community to make a community safe is paramount in this day and age.
I was going to save some of these comments for Chief King there, but
Why don't we
have him up first, because I want to come back to this particular topic.
All right, we good, Jen, with Dr. Harrington?
Yep, thank you.
Awesome.
Sorry to.
That's all right.
Good questions.
Good evening. Thanks for having me out in the blizzard.
I'd say welcome, but we're in your house.
Yeah. That's right.
You're always welcome. Just real quick, I just want to talk real quick about obviously the collaboration between the police department and the schools. Started with Chief Kelly with DARE back in, I don't know when that was, and it's just increased ever since with starting with our first SRO, Sergeant Matt Pinard, then Sergeant Fernandez, and then Detective Mike Crory. But the cooperation that we have as a whole is just, it works, and it works for our town, and it works better than most. I will tell you that right out. I've talked to many school systems and police departments, and the working relationship that we have is far greater than most. And I think that shows in the, in the type of adult that turns out of Littleton school systems at the end. And it doesn't take just the schools, it doesn't take just the police department, it does take, the entire community to support this effort. And I think that's part of what makes Littleton, what it is. So, with that said, our responsibilities in the school are just what it makes it sound, school resource officer. And that's whatever resources that we can provide for the schools, obviously, and sometimes that morphs into whether it be a truancy issue or, it can be any gamut, not just necessarily a law enforcement, a problem. That the officer is very integrated into the system, obviously much more probably in the high school and the middle schools currently, but I obviously, I've been talking to Superintendent Clenchy about expanding that role because unfortunately, our reality has changed in this day and age. I did read with interest a letter that you got from a student from Mackenzie Rock talking about, in the last number of years, how many fires have you seen kill a child or injure a child in a school? And you haven't seen any. But how many have we seen with somebody coming in from outside of school or something like that that has caused a problem? And that, unfortunately, is our reality today, and it's also your students' reality today. Reading her letter was quite telling to me in a few areas, that maybe they don't feel, if you talk to your students, which you do, I think, if you ask them, what's your biggest concern of happening to you in school? And unfortunately, the reality today with the media coverage and everything else, that does permeate their thought process. And what would we do, and how would we do it? So we have to get better at that. But with that said, obviously the Littleton Police Department and the schools will continue our Alice program. I think we have to step it up. Dr. Superintendent Clenchy and I have talked about that. And I think it's something that, as difficult as I know it is, it's not a question of can we find the time, it's that we have to make the time available, and we have to come up with parameters that we all have to meet. So, and I'm not making any suggestions right now, but something of, okay, after the start of school, within this period of time, Alice training has to happen here, 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 and here. What kind of drills are we going to do? Are they modified? Are they, one-on-one classroom time with an officer? And Alice is not only good for the schools. It's good for life in general. It's good for a movie theater. It's good for a mall. We teach Alice to companies all throughout the community. It's not just a school program. We've taught it to everyone who's asked us to teach it. And it's something that your students and adults, young adults, can bring to them when they're out, not just in the schools. If they're at a movie theater, if they're at the mall, they're at Market Basket, wherever that may happen. So, I think that's part of, what I see as the whole picture is not only have to try and make them as comfortable as we can in school, we have to give them the tools to be able to operate, unfortunately, in the world that, say, we're living in. We do have monthly safety and security meetings with admin staff, LFD members, school committee members, things of that nature. I'm going to mandate from here that from now on, somebody from the administration of the police department always is there. And I would suggest, when I talk to Superintendent Clenchy, that it's either the first or second in command, and that way, for both our departments, so that way, if a decision's made, the enforcement can come out, someone doesn't have to run back to me, ask me, what do I want to do, and then it's, we're pushing it 2 and 3 months down the road. We can make a decision at that meeting to move forward, however the decision is made to move forward. And if the bosses mandate it, that's the way it will be. The SRO constantly is meeting with the school IT personnel, checking on cameras, checking on the things like that. While we have the ability to monitor the cameras are not up here 24/7. They only go up if we have to go down there for an emergency. During the school day, when everything's running normal, nobody's looking at them, nobody's, it's only strictly there for the use, for us to have it if there was some sort of an unfortunate situation that occurs. Also is used at night after school is closed, when if an alarm comes in, we can instantly pop up a quadrant and things like that and see if somebody has in fact access to schools. But, you know, the cameras are a great tool for us, but again, they're only used when the tool is needed. They're not, we don't monitor the students just during their general day. The whole department, and I would say especially the detective unit, they monitor social media sites, potential problems, and that may be threats and or students that are having, you know, problems online, things like that, because it has been shown that a lot of times that students will reach out over social media in this day and age, or to other friends, and, you know, if you can intercept, I mean, I think a perfect thing was yesterday with Julian Edelman, you know, intercepted something on his site, and, you know, it was in Ohio, but, you know, he was able to thwart possibly a problem. So it's the same thing we do. In the SRO, I think being in the schools, making him or herself as integrated as they can, obviously, with the students, things like that. The students tell our SROs a lot of things. They, you know, about what's going on in the community, about possible issues with friends, and things of that nature. And that part of the SRO program, obviously, is something we want to keep going. We encourage our SROs. I think right now we have 3 officers that are in some form coach within the school system. Heather Rhodes is one of our reserve officers. Mike Crory is a coach in lacrosse this year. And I know Megan Wazinski, I believe, is basketball, if I'm not mistaken. So we obviously encourage that, and we continue to encourage that with our officers, and we try and work with them as far as their shift work here to be able to make that happen. Because I think Mike Fontanella said it earlier, you know, the more contact with our teachers, our students, the police officers, it just, you know, knowing that face, breaking down that barrier is really important in a community of ours. So, I'm a little bit more shorter than sweeter than your principal. Sorry, guys. But that's probably what I'm known for. And, you know, and I also just want to say too, as most of you know, I'm retiring in 2 months, so this is something that will carry forward long past my tenure. This is something that's ingrained within the local police department and our policies and the way we do things. So, I want to just address a few of the letters I've gotten and calls I've gotten over the last few weeks, or actually months. More SROs, more police presence. What we did right away to start was, like Superintendent Clenchey said, we started making sure that we have a uniformed officer stopping in, especially in the Shaker Lane and Russell Street schools, lunchtime, recesses, things like that, when they have student contact. They'll stop in today. I think you know, they were again at all the schools, and it's not just 1 or 2. We're just, you know, pushing them. Hey, within your patrol, stop in, go in and say hello. It's always good to have a marked cruiser out front, not for any bad reason. So if you get parents asking you how come the cruiser's always in school, tell them it's a good thing. We'll let you know if it's a bad thing. So we certainly have taken that step first off because you know, I used to call it you know, when you see a marked car out front, you know, if there's somebody that's, you know, maybe around or anything like that, they'll tend to stay away. So, you know, we've taken that step right away. Certainly, we're looking at trying to add another SRO. I would like to have an SRO that could float, especially the Shaker Lane, Russell Street, and also assist in the middle school because, you know, the main focus of the SRO tends to be in the high school right now. That's where the largest brunt of time is spent for obvious reasons. But the other schools obviously need the resource too. And, you know, from a strictly law enforcement purpose, breaking down that barrier with younger children, you know, as they're growing up, they remember that, you know, and if they see the officer as someone that they can talk to, someone that they can approach, that works for us also too throughout life. You know, it certainly is different here than it is in a you know, large, you know, very large community. However, so, you know, having that resource there in the elementary schools, I think, still is key. Obviously, parents are concerned also for safety. You know, one of the things we have coming up on the 17th and 18th, we have our active shooter training that the police department does this year. It's being done at the middle school. That is our full scenarios on how we would respond to any kind of a situation, whether it be within the schools, a business, anywhere. But again, we thank the schools for giving us that ability to train in there because it gives us real life skills that hopefully we'll never have to use, to be quite honest with you. And we do, today we get it out on social media, we get it out everywhere because we want everyone to know we're training and, don't come to Littleton because, we are rescuing our children, plain and simple. And that's it. If something ever, God forbid, happened with our system. Obviously, resources, money resources become an issue when it comes to hiring anyone. We all know that. We're just finishing our budget season this year. There is a bill before the legislature to allow us to hire officers that are newly retired now as SROs, send them to training, things of that nature. It would lessen the cost because they already have all their benefit package. It would strictly be, and it's not a retirement home job, trust me. So, obviously you have to, excuse me?
Emphasis on recently retired.
Correct. Well, and also too, it has to be the right hire for the job. It has to be somebody who wants to work the school year, schedule, and is committed to it, but is committed to being a school resource officer. It's just not a security guard. It would be a person who wants to be there, but it also gives the ability for a lot less dollar outlays for these communities to have people within the schools, and hopefully that will pass, and it gives us another option that is coming forward. As Representative Arciero proposed that legislation, and is just starting to travel through the legislature now. Does have a fair amount of support. I think that small group settings within the schools, referring back to Mackenzie Rock's letter about training, I think that would work out. I think we should, when we're talking to our children today, we have to tell them, what their options are. Is it run, hide? Maybe she stated some things really great in her letter. Is it run, hide, fight? What do I have to do? And so I think that's certainly something that we'll take up, certainly to make sure that that happens. It was great to have it pointed out that we do have some weaknesses there. And obviously, if a majority of the students believe that they don't know enough, whether we think it's right or wrong, it's their reality, and we have to try and help change that reality. So that's it. Again, that's kind of where we're at.
Okay. Questions for Chief King?
So a couple, and maybe these are tag team between you and the principal here for answering. So the first one is touches on sort of our response protocols here, particularly between whether it comes up from a police report type of perspective or a school reported perspective here on obviously I don't think we always want to elevate something to be a police event, in terms of a response piece there, but there's also a judgment call there. Could you talk a little bit about your protocol, so to speak, in terms of how you maybe try to de-escalate something before it becomes a police event, even though you may be the originator of the original source of the information? I'd like to just understand how we work that jointly between the schools, and then what's that choice that it escalates to be more of a police event than a school.
Obviously, again, that goes back to the collaboration, and first off, talking through what the situation is and where is it best resolved. Is it something that has to go to the court system for resolution, or is it better placed and left in the schools? And I'll pick on, for instance, if two students get in a shoving match in the cafeteria, I mean, technically that's an assault and battery. Okay, technically that's in our purview. In my opinion, it doesn't. Depending on once we talk it through or talk about that belongs in the school's purview for 99.999% of those cases, or things like that, because that's something that the school can resolve. Because not that I'm saying that any kind of physical confrontation is correct, but we all know that occasionally they do happen, within our school systems. If it's determined that, it's a bigger problem, then, we'll take what steps we feel are needed. We tend to try and allow the school to handle things that are appropriate for in the schools, in the stay within the schools, and it's a tough line, I can't give you a hard line
Yeah,
to
no,
understand
no,
on
I
exactly
want people to
what those
understand
are,
what our approach to that is.
Our approach is, first off, to basically discuss it, look at motivations, see what exactly is going on. And a lot of it's input from the SRO, from the superintendents, from guidance, from anything on certain situations, obviously. If it's a mental health issue, obviously we try and direct it to the mental health professionals. I don't see any worth in taking a child to court when they can get better services either from within the schools or from the mental health professionals. Depending on obviously, and it depends on circumstances always. But, I guess we would err more on the side of trying to get that, individual help. Obviously, watching what the situation is. Obviously, if it's a threat to the school that's serious, things like that, okay, different ball of wax, so lots of business severity, to be quite honest with you, but, certainly, even severity, we talk, we always communicate between us. We share information, we share a lot of information that the officers come across, even if it isn't necessarily, happening on a school. If we break up a high school party on a Friday night, they know about it, just to let them know what's going on. Because, it's things that the schools do need to know what's going on and do need to keep on top of. So, unfortunately, I can't give you hard and fast, but it's collaboration and discussion and finding the most appropriate place for that to go and ensuring the safety of not only that student, but the overall student population.
And my purpose in asking that is so that people can understand that there is a dialogue that happens relative to events, and we can't always predict how those events are going to eventually unfold there. And the reason I wanted to follow up after the previous part of the discussion there is, we use the term school resource officer. It's not school security officer. I'm not comfortable looking at the police presence in the schools as a security mechanism. I really believe in, maybe it's the wrong term, community policing. Police officers are people too. And the more exposure, you use the coaching and the other pieces there, the more exposure people get to, it's another person that can help with the situation. It just happens to be our police and law enforcement piece there, breaks down the barriers of that distinction. Because I think the schools, we've seen them that emphasize security, purely security, and it changes the culture within the school when it almost looks like an armed presence for a security officer. And I think we have to be careful about what we're looking for in terms of how we want to do school and community safety kind of thing there. So, so when we talk about more presence, I'd really like to understand what we're talking about in terms of breaking down those barriers, building a more fluid connectivity between it, as well as providing the safety measures that we need that will help from the external pieces there. But I don't really want to have it as a discussion personally as a school security officer.
I want to echo that because
and I was just uncomfortable with a little bit of the tone of some of the pieces there that I felt I wanted to sort of end on that part with my list of things.
There's no question that the community benefits from the presence of a school. We've benefited tremendously from the presence of our school resource officer for all the reasons that we've all talked about. And the idea of having a presence, a law enforcement presence in all our buildings and on a fairly regular basis and sustained basis sets the tone to allow us to, if we ever needed it, heaven forbid, but it's there for intervention of any number of issues. But when we're talking about intervention of an active shooter or violent incident, I think we need to be careful, because that's an ancillary and really the last benefit I think about when I think about a school resource officer. I'm not thinking like, oh, I'm glad there's a school resource officer in case somebody comes in and starts doing that. I'm thinking that the school resource officer is there, and it minimizes the likelihood that one of our students is going to feel like that's how desperate they are, along with all the other programs we do. It's not there to react when it actually does happen. We have our protocols to deal with that. We are Littleton, we are smaller, we are able to respond more nimbly than many other larger towns and communities would do, with more buildings, more road to cover, et cetera, et cetera. So I really want to echo the point you're making. If the community is asking us for more school resource officers because of the things that school resource officers are primarily designed to do, I'm perfectly willing to have that discussion and entertain that as a resource that the community wants to benefit from. But if we're thinking about, oh, it's going to cut down on the likelihood of, injury and even death because things can happen, I think we need to think that's not our answer for that. Personally, that's the way I feel about it. Because if it is, then one more school resource officer is not going to make that much of a difference. We need at least 3 more, right? We have 4 buildings. And maybe one's not enough for each building to do that kind of work. We need 2 or 3. I don't know. But if that's the way we want to think about it, then that's a different discussion from having additional school resource officers or additional presence from our public safety professionals, whether it's a specific designated resource like the SRO, or just saying, oh, and I really appreciate what you said about our first reaction was, let's make this a little bit more of our normal patrol day. We're out there on the streets, we go by all of our buildings, our community, our businesses, let's go by the schools and actually get out and walk in, and we really appreciate that. That's been great.
Well, and to be quite frank, it really works well in the elementary schools because they still like to see police officers in uniform.
I think it's cool.
High schools sometimes don't like to see us as much as, but I say that, tongue in cheek, and I 100% agree with you. I mean, one person is not going to stop, the tragedy. Now, they certainly may be there to intervene if things are right and everything else, and mitigate the circumstance, but certainly it is not going to necessarily stop it. But again, and you're absolutely right, the school resource officer is not there. I think I listened to Kelly earlier when he said, we want to make our schools softer. That's what the SRO is there for, not necessarily to set the school up like a jail or a fort, because nobody wants to go into school in a presence like that. Obviously, you've taken a lot of steps to ensure that outsiders, people from the outside who don't belong there, it's much harder for them to enter the schools. But let's face it, if somebody wants to drive a truck through the front of Littleton High School, without making it look like trying to get on an army base, you're not going to stop that. So again, the SRO is there as a resource to the schools, to the thing. Yes, they're a police officer, but I would say secondary. The secondary assignment, while obviously security and safety is on their mind, that's not what they're 100% there for.
Thank you.
Jen, questions? Yeah.
No, I'm good.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
But please don't leave, because
I'm staying.
Sure, thank you. Do we have other comments or questions, or?
I'm good. I did mine all through,
Okay.
so.
At this point, I would like to open it up for public input. If anybody has specific questions or comments on what we've heard or not heard, now's the time. Just name and street, please, just so for our program.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie Rock. I'm a sophomore at LHS, and I live on David Way. Obviously, Mr. King talked about my letter, but I did write a letter to the school board, and I just wanted to share my thoughts and concerns about Littleton Public Schools' approach to keeping our students safe against the backdrop of active shooters in the U.S. The Friday after the school shooting in Florida, we had a talk in one of our classes about the school's actions towards Alice and keeping our students safe, and we were told that the school had decided that there wasn't room in the schedule this year or anytime soon to do an Alice training. And then the day after the shooting, they decided that there was time and we could find a time in the schedule for Alice training because we need to keep our students safe. So I was looking at interviews about the Florida shooting, and Jim Gard, who is a math teacher at Stoneman Douglas, had said that I think without Alice training, it could have been significantly worse, which actually really stuck with me, thinking that 4 years ago was the last time any Littleton school had had an Alice training, and there were some teachers who had decided they didn't want to mess up their classrooms or they didn't want anything to be moved around, so they would just talk about it and students didn't get the hands-on that they needed, which didn't happen in every class, but I talked to my friends and there were some classes that didn't get the hands-on experience that everybody got. And while sitting with my friends at lunch that Friday afternoon after the shooting, we had talked about how we had already been sophomores in the high school and we didn't know exactly where to go if something were to happen. While sitting in classrooms, you look around and you're taught in middle school, like, you hide where they can't get you through the window, they can't get you through the door, but I'm sitting in some of my classrooms and I'm like, I don't even know where I'd move, like, I don't know what to do, and that really stuck with us. And then we began to think about fire drills and how we do fire drills twice a year because at a point they were a big risk and students needed to know what to do in the event of a fire drill or a fire, and where to go, where to walk, what doors to go out of, what happens if you're not in your classroom, what happens if you're in the bathroom, whatever. But we didn't know what to do in the event of a shooter, and unfortunately today we have a greater chance of being killed or injured by an active shooter than we do a fire. Thankfully, Littleton High School has found the time this year to conduct Alice training or talk to their students about it, but that wouldn't be the case if 17 people had not lost their lives on Valentine's Day. And I know it's been talked about already, but I do want to recommend that the school board looks into making it mandated that it happens every year, at least once, just because the schools get bigger as you grow up, there's different places to go, doors lead different ways, and it's not fair to students that they come into school not knowing what to do in the event of something that unfortunately today is so likely. And I think we need to acknowledge the times that we live in, and the well-beings of the students in Littleton is much too important.
Okay.
Questions?
I appreciate you, we did see the letter, thank you, and appreciate you coming out tonight. I think one of the things, the message that we're trying to get across tonight is that we do a lot of programming, there's a lot of different protocols in place, and one of the things as a school committee we want to make sure we're doing is measuring the effectiveness of those programs. And one of the things you just talked about is maybe we need to do more frequent training. I will say that there is literature out there that says you need to be careful about how much and making sure that your training is age appropriate, because these trainings can create stress and anxiety in students. So you're trying to find that balance point where you're making sure everybody can be as safe as possible, heaven forbid that this is the circumstance they find themselves in, versus, you're overtraining for something that is, statistically speaking, unlikely. But when it does happen, you do want to be prepared. So we're going to reevaluate, and the Safety and Security Committee will definitely be taking up the idea of, is our current programming in place, the right programming, and are we implementing it in the most effective manner, timing, resources, things like that. So I think that you're right. It's unfortunate that it took the particular events, tragically, that did occur, but given that it did occur, we are now actively reevaluating all of that, and I think you'll see some changes coming in short order. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
That's very great.
Other public input? Okay, thank you. I appreciate the effort. It took a while, but we deliberately put this on the agenda after what happened, and we thought it was important that the community get a sense of the fact that we do have a tremendous amount of programming in place, both in terms of school safety and social and emotional learning. It's something that's emphasized on a daily basis in our buildings, but reiterating it in detail like we did tonight and taking the time to do it, I think was beneficial. So I appreciate the amount of effort that you guys put forth to do that. Thank you.
And Mike, if I may, just, they weren't here tonight, but the fire department is equally involved in our safety and security meetings. I just want to mention that.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Old business, the alumni use, field use policy.
I had brought this draft policy before the school committee about a month ago. And at that time, we wanted to, or actually, we were waiting from bond counsel to see what they thought about the plan. Since then, bond counsel has approved the plan as written. And this plan needed to be in place so that the town could secure the bond. If we didn't have a plan in place, the town would have to go through the entire process of applying for a bond again. So we're good. My recommendation is, though, like anything else, we need to try it out and see what happens. So I would like to have you endorse this plan for now, and then let's spend a season, a sports season, and see if it suits our needs or it needs to be tweaked. At that point in time, if we decide it needs to be tweaked, then we would re-image it, or whatever word we want to use. Then we would be required to send it back to bond counsel for approval. But the bond's already in place. Our biggest hurdle that we needed to get over was to have something approved by bond counsel so that the bond could be solidified at town meeting.
I have a question about that. The last time I thought the process was the bonding companies wanted assurances we had a policy in place. I didn't catch that we had to have approval from some other outside organization about our policy.
It's not, it had to, they're not approving our policy.
The term that Kelly used there bothers me a little bit in terms of...
It had to meet certain parameters so that they can guarantee that their investment in the bond is being protected. So for instance, if we had said that, for different types of groups, we're going to charge this money, they're like, well, we don't want those groups in there. Like if they said, you're going to have, for a monster truck rally, we're going to charge $250 an hour, they're going to say, you're not supposed to have monster truck rallies on a synthetic turf field. You're going to ruin the investment, and we're not going to get paid our bond. So in terms of them approving it, it's not approving the actual policies, rental fees, things like that. There were parameters in their language that they needed to vet to make sure that it was going to meet their requirements to support the bond issue.
Yeah, but I don't really get the sense of the language used in terms of, if we want to change the fee structure, do we have to send it to bond counsel for approval?
What you would have to send to them is, they don't care about the fee schedule, they just want to make sure that's the only thing you changed. And that the parameters that they need in there are still being supported.
I think we need a process where we get the parameters that they view need to be in there on it. I'm a little concerned about, I guess I'd like more understanding of what is this external process and the regulatory requirement behind it.
That's a discussion for Steve Venuti.
Yeah, Steve Venuti is the one handling bonds for the town, so if you have those questions, I would direct him, I would ask you to contact him. My conversations were with Steve Venuti was we had X number of weeks to get this plan done, or we would not have a bond. So we were able to get a plan in place and have them endorse what we've done. Beyond that, I rely on the expertise of the town in those matters. I don't, as a school district, control the bond. We don't, as a school committee, control the bond. So I would recommend you have a conversation with them.
Do you want to have that conversation before we vote to approve?
No, I just want to raise my concern about...
I get what you're saying, and my attitude would be that I want to make sure that we don't feel constricted by, if we're going to change the fee structure, we're going to change the fee structure. If we want to change, how we make available different portions of the facility, I don't feel like we're being constrained by that. I feel like our administrators, whether it's on the school side or the town side, have more bureaucracy than they have to go through than I would otherwise support. But we don't have a say in what the bond council does or doesn't require. Now, we could argue that, that our staff is over-reading the requirement and
Well, that's why I'd like to make sure we understand what the formal requirement is, because bond counsel is whose is that? That's not the bond company that is issued the bond.
As I understand, it's the lawyer of the bond company that's...
No, you said the town, you said the bond company.
It's a bond counsel. My interpretation of counsel has a legal implication to it. I mean, really, I appreciate what you're saying,
trying to
Darryl,
understand.
but, yeah, but for tonight's purpose, we're not changing it at this point in time. It's been approved, so we can certainly obtain answers to those questions. Or
I'm
I
not
think
gonna hold
it'd
up
be-
the vote on this.
Yeah, I think it would be better, though, that you, if you want to sit down with Stephen, Hood, and I, that would be great, because I'll probably learn a few things as well, since, you know, they do those things for the school department when we have to access a bond for a project. When this first emerged, before we figured out who was going to be responsible for Alumni Field, Park and Rec had already done a sample field policy use that they were ready to submit. So it's something that's been in the works for a while. So if you would like to meet,
I think, well, I'll have to see if I can find time during the day, because it's a little challenging right now.
if you'd like me there, just let me know and we'll make it happen.
Right. Any other questions or comments on that? I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to accept the alumni field use policy as written.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Just as a extension of that conversation, we are very close to finalizing the memorandum of agreement between Park and Rec, the school committee, and the Board of Selectmen for the Highway Department. Chuck DeCoste, Gary Wilson, and I met. I'm not Gary Wilson. Gary and I met. Yeah, thank you. And so I will be distributing that to us to look at. All three boards need to vote it. I'd like to vote it at our next meeting, so I'll get it to you guys. Because that's the last meeting we have prior to town meeting, and I would like to get it done prior to town meeting. Just because we are in our spring season, so it's going to start to be implemented one way or the other. So we just want to make sure we get that. So be on the lookout for that. All right. Update on the director of PBS hire.
Right. I'll start the conversation and then ask Dr. Jamian to talk about
Principal Temple.
Principal Temple to talk about the process. We interviewed some finalists for this position on Tuesday, and I have made an offer to a candidate. They've agreed verbally on the phone. I apologize, I can't disclose the name until the contract is signed. And they will be coming in tomorrow to negotiate a contract with me. I'd like to commend everybody that was involved in that process. It was thorough, and I'm sure Matt can attest to that. Matt was part of the screening committee, and I was thrilled with the finalists that were sent to me, and those finalists were interviewed by the entire leadership team as well as myself. So I'm very, very pleased that we have a candidate, knock on wood. Until they're signed, I'm going to be cautious. And it's a very, very key position in our district. And to have had somebody for 5 years in that role that's done an excellent job and is retiring, it's nice to know that we're going to have somebody in place in April rather than still be looking for somebody in June. So I'm thrilled. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Principal Temple and Dr. Jamie.
Thank you. I'm going to pass out some documents that will be put into the
No, that's fine. If it's going to go in the packet, we'll be fine.
So what I passed out and what will appear in the minutes to give the school board committee and the community at large, as well as the staff at all of the 4 schools, is 2 documents. The first one is the actual posting that went out on January 26th. This posting was put on the Littleton Public Schools website. It was put on the electronic platform SchoolSpring, and it was put on the Massachusetts School Superintendent's website, as well as the Massachusetts School Administrators website. That Massachusetts School Administrators organization is a newly formed merger of the secondary level administrators in Massachusetts and elementary administrators. So this administrative opening was thoroughly advertised. It was a detailed document. I will emphasize that this process was an iterative process. There were revisions of every single one of the documents, and our current PPS director, Dr. Detweiler, penned the listing of duties of Director of Pupil Services. That was a significant and key addition to the documentation, because it signaled to the applicants, and it also signaled to the screening committee the range of duties of the PPS director. We had 1 month from January 26th to February 26th for the applications to come in. Principal Temple and I screened the applicants for the screening committee. All 4 of the principal newsletters contained an invitation to the parent community and the staff, the faculty and staff at all 4 of the schools to join the screening process. And these words, this document that you have here, Spring 2018 PPS Director Screening Committee, in their own words, literally is their own words. What each of the members of the screening committee wrote and shared in their email. I mean, this was not a treatise that they wrote. This was not a dissertation or a paper. This was in an email, and you see how thoughtful the members of the screening committee were in their applications. I would like just to, before I turn over to Principal Temple to describe, our meetings and our interviews in general, I just want to name the members of the screening committee. Principal Temple and I co-chaired the screening committee, and Matt Hunt, Mr. Hunt, was the Littleton School Committee member on that committee. The other members of the committee were Carrie Lavoie, who was the CPAC representative, Danielle Ferrier, who was a parent representative, Susan Zelt, parent representative, Zach Hurdle, special education teacher, Littleton High School, Sarah Hogan, special education liaison, grade 2, Shaker Lane, Holly Ballard, speech and language therapist, Littleton Middle School, Sue Pettingill, English language learning teacher, district-wide assignment, Kat Dale, grade 4 teacher and grade 4 team leader, Russell Street School. Each of the meetings were incredibly thoughtful, and our discussions were enriched and informed by the insights of this group, in my humble professional opinion.
As Jerry Lynn mentioned, we chose February 26th as the deadline for the candidates to give them through the February vacation week, in hopes that people would take that time for the applications, and that was important to remember. We did get out really in front of this, and we were happy about that. So we were posting early, and so we did have a nice list of candidates. Our first screening meeting, we had several committee meetings. I will say, I'm pleased with how many people on staff volunteered. It's a significant amount of time, and we had a lot of people volunteering. We actually had to screen for the screening committee because so many people really wanted to be on and had really important reasons why they wanted to be on. So that's always nice to be able to commit to a committee. So in our first meeting, we screened through the materials. We, really got to know each other a little bit better and what our roles are, and then looked through the candidates, really looked through the candidates' paperwork and shared that information with each other. The second meeting we talked about, we finished with screening the candidate paperwork, and then we talked about what our protocol would be, and really step by step what our protocol would be. We had our interview nights. And then our final night is when we had our deliberations. And it really was, we really were pleased with the caliber of candidates that we brought through. And we really did spend a significant amount of time deliberating, even if the deliberation was to say how much we liked the person and really positive attributes of our candidates. So we were pleased to be able to send through 3 names to the superintendent. I think it was very reassuring and complimentary to Dr. Clenchey that from the onset we knew if we did not think that our person was in this list, that we could go back and start again. And I think that was pretty reassuring to our committee that we didn't have to settle for anyone in this pool. If we weren't pleased with these candidates, we could re-advertise and go forward again. And I took it as a compliment to us that everyone on our committee said if we had to go forward and continue meeting, everyone on the committee said that they would continue on our committee. So it really was a pleasure to spend time with everyone. So we are very pleased. I don't know about you, but I was holding my breath a little bit on the admin round. But I was, because you really hope that the people you're rooting for and that you've pulled through will come forward on that day as well. And so that was a great day this week to have the candidates come back as well. So we were very pleased, and I can't wait for it to be announced. So it was great.
Questions or comments? Thank you to everybody that was on the committee. I've been on several of these committees. It is a significant but very important process. So when we get that many people bringing that much energy and commitment to it, it makes us feel like we know moving forward, because transition is inevitable. We're going to have staff turnover, but being able to navigate that transition well, which I think you're showing us that we were able to do, and then we'll have the hire hopefully in the near future, and we'll just continue to move forward. So thank you.
Great.
All right.
I was just going to say it was a really fun process. I know working with Jerry Lynn and Charles, and I've been on several of these committees myself in my own school district, and just being able that they vetted the candidates down to, I thought all 4 candidates that we initially interviewed were capable of doing the job, and I think that they did a really nice job with that. So, like I said, it was a really high energy committee, and I said it was a pleasure working with everyone there. So I was excited with the candidates we move forward.
Good. Thank you. All right. Any other old business? All right. We're at the second section of the meeting for input from interested citizens. All right. Seeing none. Subcommittee reports, PMBC.
Nothing directly related to the schools at this point. I mean, a lot of the other projects are big projects. Fire station and Alumni Field are still in the wrap-up phases, and we're getting ready to help prioritize the budget submission for facility repairs next year.
Budget subcommittee, we have nothing to update since we had our public hearing. Just really waiting for a town meeting in a few weeks to hopefully we'll get approved by town meeting. All right, policy subcommittee. Any other business? I don't think we need an executive session this late at night, so.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Made and seconded, all those in favor? Thank you, everyone.